Also, we talked about the fact that fan favorite veteran Helio Castroneves is here for this test. He is the 4th car to join that Penske stable, of course, joining along with Simon Pagenaud, Joseph Newgarden, and Will Power. Helio Castroneves, however, will only run, at least as of now, the IndyCar Grand Prix and the Indianapolis 500 for Roger Penske. The reasoning, though, for him being here is simple. Why not have that kind of a veteran voice and that kind of data accumulation that can come with a veteran like Helio Castroneves? Just another resource that Roger Penske takes advantage of now for his driver, who now runs in sports cars primarily for Roger Penske. A lot to watch, including some of the young drivers who have been very fast. Tony Kanaan said in the earlier session that they just still had some issues trying to find things out for that AJ Foyt team. So a lot to look for here over the course of this second session on a day that has a 62-degree ambient temperature, 79-degree track temperature. Mark?
One of the best parts about the session earlier today was the interaction we had with those watching around the world, across the country and around the world. Don't forget, follow us on Twitter. If you have a question, you can post it there, and we will be sure to get that answer for you, at least from one of us, or Jake can get that answer from somebody on pit road if need be. We mentioned R.C. Anderson was 4th quick, the top 10. Zach Veach, Marco Andretti, Scott Dixon, Spencer Pigot, Alexander Rossi, and Max Chilton in the top 10. A couple of guys we didn't talk about a lot, namely Marco Andretti and Spencer Pigot. They had good sessions this morning.
Yeah, they did indeed, and both of them in need of a really good season here. Both of them had a bit of an up-down season last year, and I think want to really put it all together. And that starts right here by just having a good, solid test, figuring out the car setup, and also that of the refinement with the driving. And I think in the case of Marco Andretti, when you look at him historically, he's always so quick in the opening sessions at each single track that he goes to, and in low grip situations there's arguably no one better than him. But then once the track grips up, he's sometimes struggled a little bit just to refine that driving technique. So I think that's what he's really going to be working on, and as the grip level comes up here at COTA as well, that's going to be his primary thing to look for.
Got a peek at Kyle Kaiser moments ago. Press conference held here in the media center with NFP, his sponsor, announced for the race here in a couple of weeks. A company based in Austin, Texas, ran him last year at the Indianapolis 500 and really enjoyed the relationship with the race team and with Kyle Kaiser. And for now, that's what they have in the works. And about 250 associates at their world headquarters, national headquarters at Austin, Texas, and they expect most of those associates to be here on race day.
Yeah, how cool is that going to be? And, well, if today is anything to say for what's to be expected in March, it's going to be a madhouse here, because already in pit lane it is super crowded. Everyone's getting familiar with all the drivers and teams, and it's just been spectacular today. So I can't wait for the turnout in March.
Yeah, paddock looks full. All the haulers set up and everything, and I think anybody that put this on their list of races to come, if you've not been here, I mean, I count the times over the course of the weekend, you're going to say, wow.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, and everything about this facility is just so awesome, from the track to the infrastructure and everything around it. It's got something to do for the entire family, so it'll be a great race weekend, no doubt. And you're seeing Ed Jones here in the shot in his Scuderia Corsa at Carpenter entry. New team for him this year, so it'll be interesting to see how he does. Obviously shown a lot of flashes of speed last year, but lack of consistency. And if you go back to his rookie season with Dale Coyne Racing, it was all consistency and maybe not so much outright speed. So I think he needs to try and find this year to find a happy medium between the two to put together a good season.
A lot of folks felt like he should have shared that Indy 500 Rookie of the Year award with Alonso a couple of years ago on the ride that he had.
To me, he shouldn't have shared it. He should have just won it. I mean, he finished 3rd in his rookie year, and Fernando Alonso had some rotten luck, but at the same time, that was a hard-earned 3rd place finish there for Fred Jones. So no doubt he should have been Rookie of the Year that year. But anywho, I am not the judge.
But you talk about at Carpenter Racing, that ended their long-time relationship with Fuzzy's Ultra Premium Vodka, the organization that they brought to the sport. And again, the announcement that was made, as you talked about the partnership, I've said this for the past couple of years now. I don't think Ed Carpenter gets enough credit for his business acumen and what he's been able to do with that race team.
No, for sure. And it's one thing just being a straight up businessman, but to be a businessman and then put your helmet on and just be a badass racer the way that he is on the ovals, that's saying something. He just has ultimate dedication when he's out there on track and always hangs it out there, and it's great to watch him. So look forward to getting the oval season started, but for now it's all road course mode. mode. And yeah, here we have another good onboard shot with Elio, and I'll be intrigued during the course of this session to get some more onboard footage of Elio to see if they've done anything to address that loose rear end, because in the previous session he was skating all over the track, couldn't use any steering input in the middle of the corners, and so now hopefully they've figured out a way to settle down that rear of that car, because it did not look easy to drive. So just a slow warm-up lap here. And this kind of goes in line with what we heard from Zach Veach earlier today, in that the tires are only good for 1 to 2 laps. And so what they're doing is they're really slowly but surely bringing the tires up temp, so that by the time they get to the start-finish line, that's when the tires are in their optimum temperature and they haven't overworked the tires, so they lose the grip by the time they get around to the start-finish again. So I think we're going to see a lot of strategizing around that very thing, especially coming into the race weekend.
Well, it's a shame we couldn't dial up the split screen from earlier, because to your point, it was clear when you go back and think of what you were describing from the morning session with Elio, and just watching him right now, you can tell that it's a gradual buildup, because his hands are a lot calmer in every turn.
Yeah, for sure, and you even saw that in the last corner there. He actually had a bit of understeer, whereas in the previous session he was all oversteer and all crossed up, and look at this big understeer again. So this is again what we talked about, kind of finding that contrast when you're at a new track like this. You want to make big changes so you get a complete black and white kind of description and answer on what path you want to take with the car. So they've gone from a car that was massively oversteery to now a car that's maybe a little bit on the understeery side, and then they can adjust from there. But really good to see that they've clearly addressed his concerns, and I'm sure he would have been fairly vocal about this as well.
We don't talk about it enough probably when we get the access to these helmet cams and those over the cockpit shots down into the cockpit like we're looking at right now with Elio. Is there a more fascinating piece of technology on a race car than that steering wheel?
Really not. I mean, everything runs through that. It's the umbilical cord of the race car, really, and if the steering wheel doesn't work, then nothing in the car works. So that is where every single bit of information to the driver comes through. Obviously you have the shift levers, you have the clutch, you have all the fuel trim, and all the various dials to set the car up appropriately on that steering wheel. So no, it is awesome, and just seeing the complexity of the steering wheel just get bigger and bigger and bigger over the course of the years, and just now it's a bit like a PlayStation, having to play with it every single lap.
Well, and there's times that now the technology has gotten to the point to where drivers can build specific preferences into those steering wheels in terms of what the displays are, the order that they're in, and exactly what they see.
Oh, absolutely, and it's something that's customized for every single driver, depending on what information they want and when they want it. And there's other bits of really interesting information that the dash can give you. For example, the engineers can program it to show you the minimum speed in your last corner. That way you can, as you go through that corner, you can quickly look down at your dash and see, okay, I rolled good speed through that corner that time, as a point of reference, so that you don't constantly need to have your driver coach or your engineer telling you. You actually have a visual reference for yourself. So and that's just one of 100 gazillion different things that you can do on the steering wheel. But I know for me as a driver, that was one thing that was always very helpful for me, was having that minimum speed in the previous corner, really helping me understand, okay, did I do that corner right?
Think about once upon a time that a rear view mirror was a big deal. Yeah. On a race car. Now you've got this incredible piece of technology, and as you mentioned, essentially the umbilical cord for the race team. Okay.
Ooh, look at
Graham Rahal there.
Yeah, that's looking a little loosey-goosey, and if you kind of look at his steering input, what's interesting about Rahal's situation is he actually has a bit of understeer that develops into a snap oversteer, and that's a very, very difficult spot to be. It basically lures you into a false sense of security on the way into the corner, and then suddenly the rear will snap loose on you in a very abrupt fashion.
Okay, Graham Rahal just getting ready to cross start finish, climbing up the hill, and we'll let you enjoy the sights and sounds of Graham Rahal into turn number 1 here at COTA. Graham Rahal heads to pit road.
And Graham Rahal there, I'm not sure if he's on a very old set of tires or whether they just have that setup a little bit off, but the rear end absolutely all over the place, actually quite similar to what we saw from Helio Castroneves. And there we have our answer coming in for a new set of Firestone tires. So yeah, those tires were probably on the very ragged edge. So we see one of them almost falling away from the crew here. But it'll be so interesting if we can get another onboard comparison here with Graham Rahal once he's back out on the new tires. We'll be able to see just how big that transition is from the old tires to new. Obviously, we saw him skating all over the track, struggling to get the power down. You can see all the graining on the front of these tires. So being worked super hard on this very, very abrasive surface here at COTA.
Scott Martin checks in that Racecast WX. Of course, Scott does a great job of giving you the weather forecast at racetracks each and every weekend. We actually have him with us in the booth each year at Barber Motorsports Park checking in today. Great question. Wanted to know Firestone, what compound they're using for this weekend. We'll see if Jake Query can maybe track down somebody from Firestone and get that answer. That's a great question because this is a new venture.
Yep.
I would imagine there are maybe a little bit from the test last fall. Was used to help develop a compound, but I would think that it'd be very similar to another track just as a baseline, don't you?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that test last fall helped them a lot, and I think that the track's probably only gotten more abrasive over the course of the winter, and I think part of what they were trying to achieve with this tire is to have a tire that gives good ultimate grip but does actually have a lot of fall off, because that opens up the strategy, opens up the pit windows, and it means that people can go for different options, whether you want to push super hard and go for shorter intervals between each stop, or whether you want to be a little bit smoother on your tires and fuel and go for longer windows. So I think it's a great thing that we have tires that fall off relatively quickly, and that's made itself plenty apparent so far.
Gregory Long, he's asking, you think there'll be much discussion, and there probably will be, between fans of both and fans of one or the other, about the difference in track times between times and speeds between Formula One and IndyCar?
To be honest with you, I think it's a non-relevant matter. It really is, and it's because the philosophy behind these cars and the series are completely different. The one series is just about the outright technology, outright speed, and the other one is providing the best possible racing product, the best possible racing product that it can. And I think for that reason, will the Formula One cars be quicker around here? Absolutely, no doubt. But will the racing product be better for IndyCar? 1,000 times,
well,
yes.
You know, here's the thing. I'm a fan of baseball. I'm a fan of football. I'm a fan of basketball. Don't try to make comparisons between them. I know. And because to do so is futile. I mean, be a fan of Formula One. Be a fan of INSA. Be a fan of IndyCar. Be a fan of USAC racing at Paragon Speedway in Indiana on a Saturday night. You know, just be a race fan and enjoy it for sure, especially when it's racing here.
No, and I think it'd be great for a fan to come here first for the IndyCar race and then go to the Formula One race and just see the contrast between the two. And I think even if you get close up enough to the track, you can spot some of the minute differences. Other than the speed difference, I think you can see differences in how the lap time is generated and how much movement there is in the IndyCar and how much the driver truly has to work to extract that lap time out of an IndyCar, whereas Formula One is a lot more sort of downforce driven and therefore a lot less movement from the car.
I'm getting the impression that our good friend and our cohort on IndyCar Radio, Rob Houghton, might actually be taking a day off today. He just checked in on Twitter. Had some kind things to say about you and I being in mid-season form or something.
I beg to differ, but anyhow, thank you, Rob.
Rob is not at a go-kart track or a racetrack of some kind today, apparently, which is kind of a bit of a surprise. One of the hardest working men in show business is Rob Houghton, and we can't wait to see him at St. Petersburg in a couple of weeks. Thanks for checking in, Rob.
And we have Patrick Rivage Apex here saying, I see they fixed a few bumps on the track in turns 8 and 9. Have you heard from the drivers regarding the surface? Still looks rather bumpy in a few spots. Well, I guess the best answer to that is everything's relative. When you've raced around the Detroit Grand Prix and Toronto Grand Prix, every other track on the planet is going to be smooth, probably including the Baja 500. And so I think certainly for Felix Rosenquist or for Marcus Ericsson, this is probably one of the rougher tracks compared to what they're used to. But for the IndyCar drivers, this will basically feel like a pool table as we have a bunch of lockup here for Felix Rosenqvist into turn 12.
What the drivers were talking about in Detroit last year, the year before, their knees were bumping up against the steering wheel,
oh, yeah,
the inside of the race car, the cockpit, and they had headaches when they got out of the race car.
Oh no, it beats you up. I mean, so it makes you.
And they've repaved a lot of Detroit too.
Yeah. No, it makes you appreciate a track like this, and for sure there's still a few bumps. We can even see here coming out of turn 18, coming into 19, all the grinding that they've done just to smooth up that brake zone for turn 19.
Well, he's always a great interview. He gives not only fans but all of us in the media incredible access, regardless of the circumstances. Pure class. Jake Query, one of the good guys in Mike Hull.
That is correct. Mike Hull, the managing director for, of course, Chip Ganassi and Racing. Let me ask you, Mike, first. You work with so many different cars throughout this team and so many different racing disciplines. Do you ever actually open up your laptop and then have to remind yourself, oh, that's right, this is the IndyCar date I'm supposed to be looking at?
It sets in pretty quick. We've been here at COTA several times with sports car racing and had success here. Had some not so great success here, but it's just fun to race at a premium racetrack.
When you come to any track where, for example, here, you've been here before, but from a sports car side, is anything transferable in terms of what you've been able to accumulate knowledge-wise?
There is some things that are comparable, but these days what happens, and for the viewers, we have a dry day like today, like we had at Laguna Seca when we tested there a few days ago. You have a dry day, you can now take all that information, go back to your simulation people, and they sift through it, they figure it out. And then what we do is we go to a real, we use the Honda simulator. We use that quite a bit now. And we're finally coming to grips with that device. And it's really transferable back to the racetrack. So for the rest of the year, off and on, Scott and Felix will be in that simulator getting ready for Laguna Seca.
Let's talk about Felix Rosenqvist, who, of course, is no stranger to the paddock in terms of the name and what he's done in the latter series. But what about him has most impressed you and most excited you for this year?
What impresses me is he's all business. He's a racing person. He just wants to race cars, and he can back it up. All of us would like to race cars, but few of us can back it up. And he can do that, and he's a quick study. An example, we were at Laguna, as I said a few days ago, and he'd never been to Laguna Seca, and we didn't have a simulator he could get into with a proper lap at Laguna. So I said to him afterwards, because he was second quick, how'd you do that, and how'd you get up to speed so fast? He said, I just used a video game. So he's the real deal, and we'll go through some teething things with him as the season goes on, but he'll do well.
And obviously you've worked a lot alongside for yet another championship with Scott Dixon. I'm curious, because Scott Dixon is so, from the outside, even-keeled, so focused, can you personally tell when he's amped it up a little bit and when he's dialed in versus when he's not?
We've had moments collectively where we've been amped up either together or separately, but yeah, certainly can tell. He is, as he's called, the Iceman, but that melts pretty quickly.
Mike, obviously, you have been a champion for this series and trying to continue to promote and grow it. What about this venue? What does it mean for IndyCar to come to this very state-of-the-art facility?
Well, I mean, when you think about it, globally, there's almost every racetrack where Formula One races today is a $300 million racetrack. That's what this racetrack is, first of all. That's what it costs to build, and for the level of what you find here in terms of the infrastructure as well as the racetrack itself. What's really nice about it, it's like a street race. We're 15 minutes from the central part of Austin, Texas, and it has everything to offer to us. Great diversity of corners, great pit lane, certainly a great place to work in between sessions on the racetrack, and all the rest of it. It's by far in North America probably overall the nicest racetrack we race on.
Lastly, when you've been a part of multiple Indy 500 victories, which one do you select in terms of which ring you wear? Do you mix it up? Do you just go with different years? How do you select? Which one do you have on now?
This one's from 2008. It's a great ring because what happened was Target furnished these rings to us at the end of the year because we won the Indy 500 and the championship. So it symbolizes what we do as a team. besides just Indianapolis, which is a pretty important event. But when you win a championship, it defines how well you work together for an entire year. And if you can build those kinds of years together, then you just keep working at it, and it just keeps working, and you're happy, and you get a few more rings, and it's okay.
Well, you're setting the standard for the paddock for yet another year here. We look forward to talking to you over the course of the season.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you guys here. Thank you.
Mike Holligan, the managing director, as he gets set to watch Scott Dixon in car number 9 for Ganassi Racing.
First and last, of course, not last very often, but the accessibility never changes with Mike Hall. And I think I referenced it earlier when he talked about the top speed here and the lowest speed, the slowest speed that the car would be going during this test session. He always offers up, if you don't follow him on Twitter and you're an IndyCar fan, you should, because the accessibility, the information that he passes along is really cool. And you see him in the paddock, it rarely, if ever, shies anyone away. If he does, it's because they're on their way to a meeting. I just, every now and then, the right group of guys get aligned in an organization, and I think that's clearly what they have and have had in place for quite some time at Ganassi Racing.
Yeah, 100%. And you just see that trust. Even I've had the opportunity to be a pit reporter on a number of occasions for Scott Dixon, and just listening in on his radio, and just the tone of voice and the rapport they have with each other is straight to the point. They're not going around the matter. They're just going straight to it, and they have that level of trust in each other where it's just a short exchange of words required to make a change that's needed, whether that is to the strategy or to the setup of the car. So yeah, I think that relationship is just tremendous.
Okay, so Graham Rahal coming to pit road. Did we get a chance to take a look at how much Graham had changed? I know we were on Mike Hall for quite a while there, but not really sure if Graham has seen that much of a difference in his lap time from the last time he went out on that older set of tires or not.
Yeah, so as it sits, he's 1.6 seconds behind that car of Alexander Rossi, and again didn't get a full read on exactly what he was doing here. So that's probably not exactly what he's hoping for, to be honest, with a brand new set of tires. So probably coming in after that short stint there to try and make a change to the car to see if they can still maximize this relatively new set of tires. But the thing about a tire is that it heat cycles, and the moment it's had one heat cycle on it, even if that's just one full flying lap and then you come into the pits, the moment the tire heats up and then cools back down, that's a heat cycle, and from that point forward it loses quite a bit of grip. So that is why qualifying is so crucial, because you don't get several laps or you don't get several heat cycles of a window of opportunity to make it right. You have that one shot, and that's why qualifying is so crucial.
Is that why we see in this session, as we watch Sebastian Bourdais and that Sealmaster car, that it appears as though that at least early on, when they leave pit road, the approach in the first about 3/4 to a full lap or so is for lack of a better term, it's a bit more gingerly approach than what we saw. We're not seeing a lot of hands crossing over in turns and things of that nature.
Yeah, no, and they have to be really, really smooth about that, because if they overwork the tire, you can actually lose the grip before you've even done a solid flying lap. And as for the timeline, that's actually right across there, I believe, on the entrance to turn 19. So that basically means that where they're timing their lap from is before the front straightaway. So they'll exit pit lane, they'll do a slow and smooth warm-up process to the tires, and then they'll try and go for a flyer. So I think that's probably what we're going to see here from Sebastian Bourdais as he comes up towards turn 1. So super deep on the brakes here. Do not want to have a lockup here. Roll the speed nice and smooth there for Sebastian Bourdais. And now down the hill again towards turn 2. Just a great sector here coming up with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just back to back and massive amounts of G-load. This is great stuff. This is what IndyCars are built for.
20 turns is a bit of a workout, especially with the elevation changes here.
Yeah, it is indeed, and especially on the first part of the track, there is literally no time to breathe whatsoever until you get through turn 11, when you have that long back straightaway. Up until that point, it is just go, 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 and you're constantly working the wheel.
So you think that over the next 2 days, the comfort level should be pretty high for these teams when they come back here for the race?
Well, you would hope so for the majority of them, but at the same time, there is no worse feeling than having a 2-day test and then putting the car back in the trailer, and you feel like, man, the car just is not handling the way I want it at all, or you're at the bottom of the charts. So it's one of those where it's a beautiful feeling if you put the car back in the trailer and it feels great, but if not, man, then you're scratching your head for the better part of a month, and then you come back and you're just hoping and praying that you have a good setup.
That's kind of like last season when you didn't qualify well, and maybe going into the season you had convinced IndyCar to do away with the final warm-up session before you go to the race, and now you've learned maybe that warm-up session is coming back on race day, so you'll have an opportunity to tune it up one more time before you go race.
There you go, and to my thought, it won't change anything of the result whatsoever. But anyhow,
honestly, and we talked about this last year when some of the drivers that didn't qualify well would bemoan the fact that they didn't have another chance. I think you were very adamant by saying, look, I don't know that that's going to help you all that much.
Yeah, no, because it's a much, usually the warm-ups are early in the morning, so that means that the temperature is completely different than race time, and so I really just don't see it affecting the end result that much.
So how much after that session, we talked about the long debrief, did you anticipate that perhaps some of these drivers might go so far as to make some adjustments to maybe what's surrounding them in the cockpit? I mean, did you see a bit of it off there by Ryan Hunter-Reay? You talked about the pressure and the forces on the upper body, and especially the neck area. We know sometimes you're going to stack that foam padding to one side or the other depending on whether you're on an oval or a road and street course. Do you think maybe some guys found that they needed to make some adjustments in their cockpits based upon a 2-hour session or so this morning here?
Well, I would have thought so if the grip levels were higher, but lucky should I say, for some of these drivers that haven't been in the car for a while is the fact that the grip level is relatively low, because usually we'd see them going through the corner we're looking at right now, 16, 17, 18. Oh, as we have Ryan Hunter-Reay off the track, stopped. And I actually think that's in the middle of 16, 17, isn't it?
Yeah, he went a little wide earlier. Looked like he was having an issue with the car, and then all of a sudden it has come to a stop.
Huh.
So in terms of the ride height of the race car, how difficult is it going to be to find the right ride height around this racetrack, with the bumps being rather sporadic and rather spread out, and also the elevation changes?
It's very, very difficult, and that is because you always want to run the car as low as you possibly can to generate the most amount of downforce. But think about it, brake zone for turn 1 is a huge uphill, so the moment when you hit the brakes, it's going to be so easy for the car to just bottom out, and then you're just on the skid plate and the car won't slow down. So I think it's a very difficult thing here, because it's got some bumps, it's got some off camber, it's got some cambered corners. So this place definitely won't be very easy with that. It's definitely a very different demand from corner to corner.
A full fuel load, brand new Firestone Firehawks. 10 laps into the run, how much does the car change going up that hill into turn number 1 with that tire wear and with that fuel burning off to affect the weight of that car?
It'll in the brake zone, the two will almost equal each other in that the tires fall off, but the car gets lighter, so you can probably brake in around the same time. But I think where the really biggest difference is in the ability to put power down coming out of the corners. That's where, especially around an abrasive track like this, that the grip just goes away like that. So that makes it really difficult to stay on power.
We'll talk more about that throughout the course of the show. We had a question about the tire compound. Jake Query's caught up with the good folks from Firestone.
And back, Kara Adams is the chief engineer for Bridgestone America Motorsports and Firestone Racing. Kara, first off, let's talk right about that. Let's get to the compound. This is a new track. So what does Firestone do, and is it comparable to the compound that we see elsewhere?
Yeah, actually this is the same compound that we used at Indy Grand Prix last year, but the construction is just slightly different. We're using a Road America gauge because we have a lot of long S's, so that puts a lot of heat into the tires. So to mitigate some of that heat, we use a lighter gauge, but it's the same compound as Indy Grand Prix. We actually came back here a little late last year. We were able to run a few different compounds and a few different constructions here just to get a sense of the track. Since then, they've actually done some grinding, and they repaved in turn 10 as well.
Okay, so here's my dumb question. I make a living doing dumb questions. The compound that you've come up with this, is that now set before we come here for the actual event weekend, or does Firestone still make tweaks based on what you guys learned today along with the teams?
So we're learning a lot here today along with the teams, but one thing we like to do is provide that consistency. They come here for the open test. They spend hours and hours with their car and the tire learning everything together. We're going to try to maintain that consistency inside of the race weekend, so it'll stay the same.
Speaking of consistency, obviously Firestone has been consistent in racing. If I'm not mistaken, the 70th time the Indianapolis 500 winner will be on Firestone rubber this year. But that partnership now carries for another 6 seasons. Tell me about what was announced last week.
Well, we were really excited to announce a 5-year partnership extension with IndyCar, and this will be Firestone as a sole tire supplier for the IndyCar series as well as the Indianapolis 500 through 2025. This is really great, and in order to support that announcement, we actually were able to announce at the same time a facility in Akron that's going to open up. The first new tire construction facility in the city of Akron since World War II era. This is really exciting news for both Firestone and for Akron to have that come back.
I've asked you this a lot, Kara. Kara Adams is our guest, but I want to reinforce it. People that are watching this and they say to themselves, well, these cars are going, at top speed 240 miles an hour. How does that relate to what I'm driving around in my Honda or Chevrolet on the way to the mall? But it does it not, in terms of what you're able to come up with?
Yeah, that's right. So our race tire engineers that are actually here at the track this weekend, they work hand in hand with our passenger tire engineers. So those Bridgestone or Firestone tires that you might put on your car, they're designed in the same building by a lot of the same engineers. In our off-season, we don't like to talk about an off-season, but our engineers are actually cross-training with those teams. So there's a lot of knowledge transfer, and there's a lot as far as fundamental building blocks of the tire that transfers over. Obviously, you don't need a slick tire to run in the snow. It's going to give you pretty poor performance, and if you have a snow tire here, things won't work as well. But there's a lot of compounds that can transfer and a lot of other technology and testing.
A permanent road course oftentimes has elevation changes. A street course has different surface changes, and an oval has banking. Which is the biggest challenge for a tire engineer?
I'd say all of them are decent challenges, because with the street courses, you have to be able to envelop the bumps and the different surface continuities that you hit in the surface. Road courses are a challenge, but oval, you have to design tires that will maintain the grueling loads and speeds. 240 miles per hour, you mentioned. Looking at those top speeds and maintaining a really high load and high lateral force throughout an oval bank turn. Ovals are definitely the most challenging.
It's a commitment to safety for the drivers, I know, and I know that they feel that and are very confident with it. I appreciate the time today. We'll let you get back to work. Sounds like cars are back to work.
Thanks, Jay.
Kara Adams again, Mark.
Yeah, really good stuff, Andrew. So question asked, question answered about the compound, and going to be pretty comfortable with the compound that they've developed for the test this weekend. But you heard her say they're always looking to get better, and as far as that technology transferring over, I'm happy to say I've got Firestones in
Yeah, no,
it served me well in the wintertime.
And it's just so cool that they have this bank of data to where they can just pull the compound from the Indy GP and the construction from North America and combine the two into a tire that'll be perfect for any given track. And I mean, that is the single biggest strength of Firestone, is I think that ability to just give the drivers that assurance every single track, we're going to have a tire that's not just fast and durable, but it's going to be safe as well. And that is, ever since I came to America, that was sort of the one thing. No one ever had any issues with a Firestone tire ever. There's other constructors.
I don't remember one.
Yeah, no, there really hasn't been, and it's astonishing given the amount of different types of tracks they go to, and new aero kit starting last year, not a single issue. So yeah, really big kudos to them.
Yeah, you can bet that the overwhelming majority of the time, if not each and every time, if there's been an issue, it typically has been related to debris.
Yeah, no,
not a construction failure for sure.
100%, and no, they've done a tremendous job. And anytime there has been an issue, it's been quickly addressed. But they are typically very, very proactive about those things, so that they don't even become an issue before they get to.
And I know maybe I wouldn't have felt this way once upon a time when I was out on the course. It's different than I'm now in the booth, but. And our pit reporters and turn announcers probably wouldn't feel the same way, and racing fans might not either. But one of these days, I would really like to see a majority of the race run in the wets, just to see how wets perform. And I think drivers, by and large, wouldn't mind. I don't want it to be to the point to where we've seen it before, where the rooster tails made it impossible to see. but just enough to where they would need those for the majority of the race.
I wouldn't mind seeing just a light drizzle for the entirety of, well, let's say this race, because I actually think this would be a very, very fun race, and that's where driver skill is at an absolute premium, and the ability to seek alternate lines, because the racing line you don't want to be on because it's full of rubber, and rubber becomes super slippery in the rain. So that's where drivers have to adapt super quickly, and every single lap there's changes. So hey, I'm all for it as long as I'm in the booth.
Well, I will say this. We are a long way from anything like that today, huh? I mean, temperatures warming up into the upper 60s. I think it's getting a little warmer than they initially forecasted, and that sunshine is bright to the point where we had to roll the shades down a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely perfect. So I think couldn't have asked for a better day, and there is a slight bit of wind now that's picked up during the course of the day, but still nothing that'll upset too much here. And we're still getting a lot of really good questions on Twitter, and Marvin Blue is back at it here asking, hey, what driver what driver/drivers do I need to keep an eye out for 2019? And who is your favorite pop group, Spice Girls or Little Mix? Well, I'll answer that pop girls or the pop group thing first. That is obviously Spice Girls.
Okay, I'm uncomfortable.
There is no question about it. They are just magnificent.
That explains your ringtone.
And what driver and drivers do you need to keep an eye out for 2019? Well, I think you kind of have, of the establishment, I think you can really see Alexander Rossi be on top of his game this year. He was certainly, in my opinion, the quickest driver during the course of the year last year. I really think we're going to see him go from strength to strength. He's going to be difficult to beat for the championship. But as far as up-and-comers are concerned, I mean, I think we have in the rookie crop, we obviously have Felix Rosenqvist, Marcus Ericsson, and Colton Herta, all of which can show tremendously well. But don't count out someone like a Zach Veach, who just had such nice progression during the course of the year last year. And I think he's on course for a podium, if not a win this year.
I think he's going to win a race this year. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, just when we talked to him earlier today, you heard him say that he has got a whole head full of data at this point after going through everything, all of the data files from last year, spending the offseason looking at all of that, going over it with his engineers and the race team. And there is a level of confidence in that interview that we had with him earlier today that makes sense after a full season. We talked about it earlier. Alexander Rossi is, I think, in the hunt, but and we'll get specific numbers for you at some point. But if memory serves me correctly, the season following a championship season rarely has been a memorable one for Scott Dixon, and that may very well change this season.
It could very well be, but there's a bunch of hungry drivers around him, one of which we're on board with right now, James Hinchcliffe, who obviously had that huge win at Iowa Speedway last year and Long Beach the year before, so he's had really, really high highs, but he's also had some fairly big lows, so it's a matter of kind of evening those out and having just a super consistent run for James Hinchcliffe this year. And I really think that the key for him and Aero Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports this year is going to be figuring out their road course game, because on street courses and ovals, or short ovals especially, they really are quite strong, but on the road courses, yeah, they have a little bit of work to do. So this test will be a perfect opportunity to figure that out.
I mean, you talk about the competitiveness and the depth of this field. Say you're starting 23rd, 24th, and you start before the race starts, when all the cars are lined up on the grid, you start at the front row and walk back to your car. How do you not get to that last row, hop off the wall, and just say, what am I doing? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? I mean, not only is the champion a true champion because of the various disciplines, and adding this to the mix in Laguna Seca and Indianapolis and Texas and Iowa and places, Road America and others. But my goodness, the field, the talent, the field that you have to beat too. I mean, there are no slouches in this field, period.
And especially now with this unified aero kit as well. I mean, all the cars, for intents and purposes, on equal playing ground. And the only real big differentiator, the shocks, which are obviously open from team to team. But outside of that, just completely wide open as far as who's going to be competitive at any point in time at any track. And I think that's what we loved so much about the season last year, is you never went into a race weekend having a true picture of who was going to be strong and who was going to struggle.
So Patrick said, he saw that Felix Rosenqvist packed an espresso machine on his carry-on luggage. So he wants to know, and Anders, you can speak to this. Do racers, by and large, bring the comforts from home on the road with them? Did you or do you still? I mean, I guess you can still I would still consider you a racer.
Well, I'll say this much. I'm a very grumpy person if I don't get to have a double shot of espresso in the morning. Yeah. So I'm fully supportive of what Felix Rosenqvist has done, and the transition from European coffee to American coffee can be quite stark. I know that for a fact. So yeah, bringing his own espresso machine, putting matters into his own hands.
Now Ben Johnston wants to know, and we addressed this a little bit as we're going to take a look at Will Power working over his Firestone Firehawks.
And that's brake zone into 12, and you see that just touching that paint on the right-hand side of the track, and boom. And it's also a very difficult brake zone because there's a little bit of a crown in the road right there. So the right front actually gets offloaded when you hit the brakes. And you're going, again, to what Mike Hull said earlier today, 175 miles an hour and then all the way down to 45 miles an hour. So very, very difficult to get the car stopped efficiently there.
Pit boxes look tight, don't they?
Do they?
The pit road and the pit boxes look, just the perception, and I guess maybe it's the tunnel effect with what they have, the multi-level structures on each side of pit road. I mean, it's the proverbial concrete canyon down the straightaway, if you will, in the setup for the hill, climbing turn number 1. I mean, it looks deceptively narrow down the front straightaway, and I guess that's because of the paint on each side, which brings me to my next question. How much do you need to be wary? I would imagine very much so if we get, as we mentioned, a light drizzle, because we know not only does the course get slick, but when those painted surfaces get damp, they get really slick.
Oh, they get incredibly difficult to navigate. So, yes, especially around here in the final corner, what you typically want to see around a corner like 16, 17, 18, as we see Zach Veach just maneuver through, you actually want to go to the outside of the track where there's no rubber, and also because the corner is slightly cambered, all the water runs to the inside of the track, so you actually want to stay on high ground as far to the outside as you can, but that means flirting with that paint, and that's not a very easy thing to do. So rain around here, I think, would bring a whole nother element, and it'd be awesome to see.
Countdown to Green checking in, very complimentary of what we're doing, and thank you for the kind words, and thank you for listening. Yes, we agree. It's been a long time since we've been able to provide any coverage, and we're happy to be back here doing just that. Jeff C. checks in, wants to talk about, we've addressed this a little bit, but why not do it again, how difficult this is for drivers coming out here this weekend who have never seen this place before.
Oh, it's for sure difficult, and luckily they all have the luxury of onboard video and simulators, so all of them should know the track. As we have Colton Herta, yeah, that's definitely a track limit violation. So get that out of the way now, and don't bring that with you into the race weekend. But no, it's certainly a challenge, and especially one that has so many undulations and elevation changes at this place. That makes it even more difficult, because even though you've seen that in a simulator, getting a true sense of the simulation and the G loads as you go into a compression or over a slight crest is almost impossible to do. So absolutely crucial to get some track time here. And luckily, though, I think the majority of them, Jeff C., again to your question, all of them so far, to the best of my knowledge, all the full-time drivers have at least done 2 days of testing. So one of which, or half of which, was at Laguna Seca, and the other one at Sebring.
Well, there's no question that the game has been upped in terms of racing simulators, and it's a huge, huge benefit for drivers, is it not?
Oh, it absolutely is, and I was fortunate enough a few years ago to actually help develop the Dallara simulator, as we see Colton Herta clips the curb and then just runs right on over in a little bit of a moment there, and again, that's what we saw in that first session. That's going to be our track limit violation corner. So, but this is good stuff here for Colton Herta, getting that out of the way here, experimenting with it, how aggressive he can be over the curbs, and what he can get away with.
Mark James, Anders Krone, Jake Query joins us on pit road. This is practice session number 2. Colton Herta, Marcus Ericsson, Joseph Newgarden, R.C. Anderson, and Zach Veach were the top 5 this morning. Marco Andretti, Scott Dixon, Spencer Pigot, Alexander Rossi, and Max Chilton were our top 10. Laced, Rosenqvist, Ryan Hunter-Ray, Elio Castroneves, and Ferrucci were the top 15. Then Power, Hinch, Pagano, Ray Hall, and Harvey. Bourdais, Sato, Jones, and Tony Kanaan. And as we mentioned, a lot of drivers this morning, not a lot of laps turned by some of it. Tire management was the big issue, and I think that early part of that morning session probably just reconnaissance laps, for lack of a better term, because I think right now conditions, they hope, are a bit more indicative of what we'll see when we come back here to race.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And this morning was mostly crucial to figure out if they had the right gears in the car, if the overall downforce levels and ride heights were okay. But outside that, now is definitely the money time.
Well, I've had the pleasure over the years, Anders, to do hospitality tours, and one of the, I guess, most popular stops that we take people on in the paddock is tech inspection area. And it gives you an inside look at exactly what that process is like. And Jake Query has more on that. Jake?
Yeah, Mark, I think oftentimes when fans are walking around through the paddock area and the accessibility at nearly all the racetracks, you get a chance to see the cars coming into tech inspection. But yet, sometimes I think fans wonder, what exactly are they doing? So I thought it'd be a great chance to catch up with, we call him Rocket. Kevin Blanche is the technical director for the NTT IndyCar series. So Kevin, let's begin with this. We look behind us and we can see these ramps in this pad, and oftentimes people see their favorite driver, or their favorite car, I should say, going up into it. What exactly is the process at the beginning of the weekend that you're doing?
So first we start out with a safety inspection station, check the headrest, the seats, the crash recorder. We have a data recorder on the car that records all the data in case of an accident. After that, they'll come through and we do a bunch of gauge work where the car doesn't have to be level. It's just widths or heights wherever it doesn't really relate to the bottom of the car. When we bring them up on the pad, what we're doing is setting the car flat to the world. And then we have a lot of dimensions that by rule book, they're kind of written off the bottom of the car. There's a reference plane at the bottom of the car. So we're looking for the height of the wings. The underwing has a certain height, the 200th window that it has to be in. And we're looking for, there's the body on the car is mainly a spec body. There are some options, but we check all the spec parts, make sure the profiles are correct, make sure the wicker heights are what they're supposed to be and not outside of the bounds. Then we actually pull the wings off the cars, and we have a couple of tables that reference, once again, just like they were on the car, but it's a more controlled environment. So the teams then can bring the wings back without the car, because the wings are probably 50% of what we do as far as tech inspection wise. So they're able to bring spare wings back, or if their wing doesn't pass, they don't have to bring the whole car back. They can just bring parts of the car, and we can reference it just like it was on the car.
If you actually bring somebody in, and let's say, for example, when you're balancing, you're flattening, as you say, the car itself, if there's an issue, do you guys yourselves take care of it, or does it go back to the team and then it's up to them to get it resolved and bring it back and start the process over again?
Yeah, so there are a few adjustments we'll allow them to do while they're here. The majority of it, they have to go away because it's taken part of the car apart, and because we're trying to do, the whole field here, 25 cars you're trying to do on a normal first tech day, that's about 8 hours worth of work. So if you allowed them to fix it here, we'd be here forever. So we give them a sheet that has a printout of about 250 items on it, and then we do what we call turn it red, so it'll highlight anything that's outside the parameters. They go away then, take a look at it, compare it to the rule book, figure what adjustments they need to make, whether up or down or fore or aft. They'll make that adjustment, and then they'll come back and bring it through, and then by the time we get ready to qualify, they need to be all green, so the car needs to be 100% legal. We don't use practice times for anything other than practice times. We don't qualify off of it, or if we get rained out, we go by points. So we're not really too concerned until it gets to the competition side.
Kevin Blanche is the technical director for the NTT IndyCar series. We're at the Circuit of the Americas for this spring test. All right, at the beginning of each race weekend, I noticed after the first practice session, all the drivers run to you, and then they stand on a square over there. Now, what are they doing?
Yeah, so we do a driver equivalency weight. So we ballast all of the drivers up to and or down to 185 pounds. So, for instance, if you're 175, you have to add 10 pounds to the car. We put that in a certain location, which is right behind their back, so that it's basically where the driver is at. And we allow them 3-pound variance either way from the start of the season. So if they reach the 4-pound mark, they have to adjust. It's not optional whether it's more or less. At 4-pound, they have to make a change. So they're all coming back. Most of the time, these guys are athletes. There's not much variance.
Who's the heaviest you've ever seen? Didn't tell me.
The heaviest is Graham, which is due to their height, right? It's a big guy. Big guys. Sato's way down there. He's a little bitty guy. But most of the time, the only time they ever change is you'll know they'll come in and you're like, man, you've been sick or something. They'll lose 5 or 8 or 10 pounds, but then they gain that right back. And guys like Dixon and Kanan that are full blown, triathletes and all that, they'll stay within a pound or two all season. It's really amazing.
Okay, last question for you. Once the race is over, obviously you bring in, let's say, the top 3 to make sure that all the specifications are what they were when they left here. Do you randomly select throughout the field to keep everybody honest throughout?
Yeah, we always take the top 5, and then we randomly pick at least 2 or 3 from each manufacturer, just once again to try to, I call it spread the love, but we aren't spreading much love down here. So it's to kind of, just like you said, we may take a guy that's 19th place, and you can question a lot, why you taking him? Well, he could have been 20th if he wasn't 19th. So we want everybody to be assured that no matter where you finish, there's a chance you may have to come back here, and that's kind of the unknown that keeps everybody, up on the top.
It's always good seeing you. I appreciate the info, and it's fun. I think it gives them an idea of what they see. It's always fun. People love seeing those cars line up, so I appreciate the explanation.
You're welcome. It's cool they can come back here, and we're one of the only racing sports that allow that to happen, and they can actually see what we're doing, and it's really cool, like you said, when they come back and why we taking an 18th or 12th place guy, that they see we're doing our job.
Kevin Blanche, but folks, if you see him, you can call him Rocket too. He answers to both.
Yeah, and if you don't see him at a racetrack, chances are you'll see him on one end of a fishing pole somewhere out on a boat for sure. And you look at that, right? That they will allow you, when you, as a fan, they will literally walk you up on each side of the pad and get you as close as they could possibly get you, even when there's a car up there and inspections going on. I mean, they'll slip somebody right underneath that pad, right underneath those ramps on both sides, and it's just what an orchestrated effort.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool about it is the fact that they do this tech before the session so that drivers and teams aren't surprised on the back end, or at least shouldn't be unless they've changed anything in between being teched and the session. But at least that way you know already, okay, my car is within the parameters that an IndyCar will let me drive. So it means that there's a lot less surprises potentially on the back end, whereas other sports, they don't do any tech on the front end of the session, so everything is just a big question mark until the end of the session. So I think that it's a great system that they devised, and enables the teams, if they are slightly outside the rule book, to address it before the session, and therefore it be an even more equal playing field. So I think it's a great program.
And the emphasis on that initial inspection of the weekend is making sure that car's safe. Everything's buttoned up. I mean, it's got to pass that. And to give you an idea of his background of experience, for those of you that don't know, I mean, he knows what to look for because he's been a crew chief himself. I mean, he was part of that monster team that they had at Panther Racing with, won back-to-back championships with Sam Hornish Jr. So he knows exactly what to look for. He knows how to talk to these guys, and he's been where they've been. And I think because of that, there's a healthy level of respect for Rocket for sure.
No, 100%. We're actually getting a question here from Countdown to Green asking, hey, was Rocket just explaining IndyCar's version of BOP? What he was explaining with the driver weights is just basically to make sure that every single car and driver combination is the exact same weight. We don't want to have one combination like previously we had where they would weigh independently, and that obviously meant that if you had a light driver, they would have a huge...
The Danica rule.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You would have a huge advantage out on the track if you were a light driver. So in doing this, they just make sure that every single driver and car combination is the exact same weight, and the weight won't be a factor.
Before that rule came into effect, if I understand it right, when Sam Hornish Jr. left Panther and went to Team Penske, he found out how much less Elio weighed than he did. And Sam Hornish Jr., who probably didn't have more than a half an ounce of body fat, put himself through a training regimen in the offseason with the idea that he was going to take off anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds just because he didn't want to, even his teammate Elio, to have that kind of an advantage.
Yeah, and I like the system they have now where they'll actually weigh the drivers at the beginning of the weekend, because it used to be, even when I was driving Indy Lights, we would only be weighed once a year. So it was the beginning of the year. And so what everyone would do is in all of January, you would eat as much as you possibly could and put on as much weight as you could. And for your annual weigh-in, you would just fill up with water, fill up with food and everything you could, get weighed in, and then as soon as you were weighed in, your goal the whole season was just to lose as much weight as you possibly could. And obviously for bigger guys, yeah, that could be a huge delta. That could be a delta of 20, 30 pounds. So I think now the system is much more fair, and so it's by no means a BOP or a balance of performance. It is just making sure that every single driver and car combination is the exact same weight.
A lot of questions from people wanting to know what the driver's feedback is, and we know this. My guess is that they're excitement at being here is only going to be intensified. The desire to get here and race under race conditions, qualify under qualifying conditions, is only going to be heightened by their visit this weekend. I think really that spent a lot of time in the debrief and didn't really get a chance to talk to too many of them. But I think after practice to this second session today, we'll have a better idea and get better feedback from the drivers. And you folks that follow on social media, I think you'll see a lot of glowing feelings and some very positive comments from these drivers about being here at COTA today.
Oh, absolutely, and especially for the ones towards the pointy end of the field. I mean, Alexander Rossi certainly at the moment 6/10 clear of Felix Rosenqvist. And just a reminder, everyone watching at home, that you can follow live timing via IndyCar.com, and great opportunity to follow everything lap by lap. But yeah, Alexander Rossi so far just a stonker of a lap there, 148.204, and then Felix Rosenqvist following 6/10 back, 148.791, with then Simon Pagenaud in third at the moment. And obviously there's still a little bit of a up and down here with new tires and old tires coming into play, but still that gap there for Alexander Rossi is pretty impressive.
And of course, the race weekend here comes up March 24th. It's one of two new venues on the NTT IndyCar Series schedule. WeatherTech Raceway at Laguna Seca will hold the season finale September 22nd. And of course, a long and storied history in open wheel racing there. 22 IndyCar races have been held at Laguna Seca over the years. It most recently hosted a finale in 1996. That, of course, is when Alex Zanardi made the corkscrew turn pass of Brian Herta on the final lap. The most recent race at Laguna Seca was in 2004. And I know drivers are just as excited about going back there as they are coming here to COTA.
Yeah, they most certainly are. But that track has changed a lot since last time they were there. So the grip level and the abrasiveness of the surface has changed a lot. And I had the opportunity to speak to Sebastian Bourdais just briefly after the test, and he said the biggest takeaway was just how abrasive that surface was and how low grip that is. And the reason why I keep re-emphasizing that is typically when we have an abrasive, low grip surface, it leads to great racing. We saw that all the year last year in St. Pete under mixed conditions. We had an amazing race, so I'm looking forward to that. So low grip surface to me is just fun.
Certainly want to welcome NTT Data as the new series sponsor. A multi-year entitlement agreement was announced in January. It's a one-stop innovation partner for big businesses and government agencies, offering a full range of IT needs. A $106 billion per year technology services giant, the parent company of NTT Data. That is, of course, a U.S.-based subsidiary. It has an ongoing multi-year partnership with Chip Ganassi Racing. Of course, we're all very familiar with that. They'll bring various technical developments to the series. The first will be a new IndyCar mobile app possessing more functionality and content. Services will not be restricted. You can download that app now. It's unveiled just in the last 24 to 36 to 48 hours. It, of course, will showcase NTT's smart racing and smart cities technology to support the sport and IndyCar's venue. So NTT Data, this is, I think, going to be a long and very successful marriage between IndyCar and NTT Data.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And they've obviously already been a great partner with Chip Ganassi Racing. So to see them expand upon this is just fantastic to see. And it's kind of carrying on the theme with Gainbridge just announced as the title sponsor of the Indianapolis 500, and with them having the Zach Veach car as well. That's really, really cool to see.
Well, and we talked about it earlier. Firestone's extended its exclusive tire partnership with IndyCar. That lasts through 2025, and that's one of those announcements that I was blown away. How many drivers responded to that on social media saying, "Hey, thank you, Evans, we're thrilled to death"?
Well, I was going to say the only people upset about that are other tire manufacturers,
well,
and everyone else are just thanking their lucky stars that Firestone's going to be hanging around for that much longer, because yeah, their product and support is just second to none.
Well, we mentioned a handful of rookies already, Marcus Ericsson and Felix Rosenqvist. We, again, are hopeful that something will come to fruition for Pato O'Ward, the Indy Lights champion. Of course, we've talked about Colton Herta, Santino Ferrucci. And we'll hear in just a few minutes, he's here this weekend. Ben Hanley is another rookie that we'll be keeping an eye on, and we'll hear more about about what his plans are for 2019. As a matter of fact, ask and ye shall receive, Jake Query.
Mark, I try to deliver, and Ben Hanley is here. Dragon Speed is the team. let's begin by talking about this. You have, obviously, you're a native of Manchester, England, and I think most people know you have extensive racing background in Europe, but not necessarily in the United States. Take me through what came together for you for this 5-car deal for the 2019 NTT IndyCar Series.
Well, obviously, it's not easy to just change championships like Dragon Speed are going to do this year, but it's a great group of people, and yeah, it's a massive opportunity for myself to showcase what I can do in the car, and yeah, I'm just really looking forward to it. You know, it's being here today for an hour. It's nice to look around and see what's going on, but after that, you just want to be in there driving.
And obviously, the debut for you will be in St. Petersburg. This is 5 races as of now, correct? Take me through which 5 will be on the schedule for you.
Yeah, so we're starting off with St. Pete, and then we've got Barber,
Indianapolis,
Indy 500, Road America, and Mid-Ohio.
Okay, when you get to St. Petersburg, you know, this is obviously a great chance for you, Ben Hanley, to walk around and familiarize, to talk to some of the guys with which you'll be competing. But what jumps out at you about this car, and what things translate immediately, what things will be a challenge?
Well, the first race is going to be a huge challenge for everyone in the team. You know, we're new to IndyCar. We're relatively new to racing in the US. That goes for the engineer as well as myself, so it's a steep learning curve, but one that we're going to relish and you know, do the best we can.
You obviously have some expansive sports car racing, including coming over here stateside to do exactly that. Is there any similarity at all to your knowledge or in talking to these guys about what you can take from that field into an IndyCar?
Yeah, I mean, there's a race in any kind of category, you're always learning and you're always wanting to improve as a driver. So I've done a lot of sports car racing over the last few years, so LMP2 last year, and this year LMP1 is continuing. So I'm going to be jumping between the series on quite a few occasions, but at the same time, last year and since 2008 really, I've been doing a lot of development for single-seater series and for tyre manufacturers. So I've got a lot of experience, and hopefully that's going to really help us get up to speed sooner rather than later.
Every time I hear about Manchester, I hear about Manchester United. Do you go to do you go and wave the flags and the scarf and the whole deal? Who is your soccer club?
At the moment, I'm quite a big fan of Burnley. So they're not having the best of seasons, but you know, they're staying in the Premier League, I think, at the moment.
And you're staying loyal. I like that, right?
Yeah, I'm staying loyal.
Hey, St. Petersburg, we look forward to seeing you, Ben Hanley, and Dragon Speed, and best of luck to you. We look forward. Maybe this will be more than 5 races. We shall see, but I appreciate the time today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at Marco Andretti after we return to action here. You see the 98 of Marco sitting on pit road there. Let's take a gander at what happened. A little moment for Marco.
So, yeah, just running wide, and that's over. Yeah, look at that. That's over one of those sausage curbs, and that's exactly what we talked about this morning, is you do not want to run over them. If you're going to run wide, you're better off actually running super, super wide to avoid those in its entirety, because otherwise you can damage the bottom of the tub. And you notice right there, right where the car took off, that's essentially right where the bottom side of the driver is. So the shock wave that goes through your body at that very moment is pretty substantial, and it's a good thing in this new Indy car that they have the additional foam underneath the rear end of the driver, because that's not a nice impact.
I would think that one could assume that nothing good would result from hitting anything called a sausage curb.
No, and to be honest with you, I don't even know that there is a proper word for it other than sausage curb. So it actually, maybe that's something for the Twitterverse. If anyone knows of the actual technical
someone come up with another
phrase.
name, please. I'm begging you, please.
But for
because now when we get back here in March, he's going to giggle like a schoolgirl every time one of us says sausage curb.
So there you have it. Marco Andretti's jumping sausage curbs. All right. On we go.
More questions on Twitter, please. Yeah. Hey, it's always great to see a new young driver come to the series, and especially via a a new race team.
Well, and I think the cool thing about Ben Hanley is he's kind of a bit of a silent assassin in that not a lot of people over here have heard about him, but he's got a ton of experience. He was actually a Renault junior development driver for their Formula One program back in sort of 2008, 2007, something like that. Did World Series by Renault, did very well there, and I think he was fairly close to making it to Formula One, but just never quite got there. So so instead of doing that, he's then gone over into the sports car realm, and he's actually still to this day doing a ton of karting, and he's actually a factory driver for one of the Italian manufacturers. So he still does a ton of racing today, sports car racing, karting, and I think he's going to surprise a lot of people.
Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That's a pretty big mountain to climb. And you know, I'd asked Zach Veach what it feels like at the start of the 500, and he said, well, he started to say, well, it's butterflies. No. I'm asking you, when you come off of turn number 4 and the green flag flies, what does it feel like at the start? And while on a smaller scale, for you, the Freedom 100, what does that feel like when all of those cars are going that fast all at once down that straightaway?
It's just like, oh my God, I'm doing this.
I mean, do you feel anything in the car? I mean, do you feel something?
For sure. But I mean, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, I mean, not to sound cliche or anything, but every time you cross the yard of bricks, it's like goosebumps. And the first time I pulled out of pit lane at Indy, it was goosebumps. So I think that only gets amplified. And having never done the Indy 500 myself, I can only imagine that the start of the race must be absolutely euphoric. So that'll be something. But that's not to say, you know, it's not that easy to qualify for the race anymore.
That's true.
Because we're expecting 35, 36, 37, 38, maybe even cars on the, you know, trying to qualify for the race. So that in its own right, just managing to qualify is an achievement.
Well, and we have seen some pretty talented drivers over the years because again, that place does not promise you anything. And I believe it's 1995 when two pretty notable drivers, I believe, in the Penske stable did not make the Indianapolis 500.
And Ben Johnston has saved me here on Twitter, and he has absolutely called it the way it should be called, and it's a sleeping policeman. That is the origination of the term, and Countdown to Green is calling it rumble strips, and Lance Snyder is saying, be glad they're hitting sausage curbs and not bacon curbs.
There you go. All right. So ask and you shall receive. I mean, that's good stuff, and that's the immediacy of social media.
It's great.
But something tells me you're still going to reference sausage curb.
Yes, that is right. With 100% certainty. Sausage curb will stick around.
Because as we know, you have a way of introducing a new language into the vocabulary here. In the NTT IndyCar series.
And it's part of the beauty of being a foreigner is that I can still afford myself to do that and have a good excuse for it. So I think I'm just going to carry on.
Alexander Rossi is P1 now. Rosenquist is P2. Pagano, Herta, Hinchcliffe, Ferrucci, Dixon, Hunter-Reay, Will Power, and Spencer Pigot. We'll reference where we're at in terms of timing and scoring a bit more frequently now, because we know in the afternoon you might actually have the screen minimized with an earbud in so your boss doesn't know that you're at work and paying attention to this test from COTA. We appreciate you doing that, by the way.
And so Alexander Rossi, top of the chart still, no change there to his time, so 1:48.204, so not having complete visibility, that would have likely been set on a new set of tires. And then the question is, of course, Felix Rosenquist, Simon Pagano, and Colton Herta following. Have they done the same? As we're getting a replay here of Matthias Leist, a little bit of a lockup, followed by a bunch of opposite lock, and is that going to, and it's a full spin. Easily done, because you crest that little bit of a hill there and you can brake so deep, but if you carry the brake a little bit too far, the car gets light, and then the moment it kind of lands again in the compression for turn 1, that's when the front grips up again and spins you right around. So that is super easy to do, and especially now with very low grip that we have at the moment.
But we should get back to the business side of things. We mentioned Firestone extending its tire partnership with IndyCar. Also plans to be the title sponsor of the St. Petersburg and Laguna Seca races to open and close this season. Should give a tip of the cap to the good folks at Speedway, now the official fuel and official convenience store of IndyCar and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And part of the program is a chance to showcase the sport in speedways at more than 4,000 locations nationwide. Of course, we talked to Zach Veach earlier. His sponsor, Cambridge, recently signed as the presenting sponsor of the Indianapolis 500. And Acura becomes the title sponsor of the prestigious Grand Prix of Long Beach. 36th consecutive year IndyCars will roar down Shoreline Drive, and the rest of that iconic course, which is just shy of 2 miles, had a long relationship with Toyota. That went away, and just like that, they were able to secure the sponsorship of Acura, and always look forward to going back to Long Beach.
Can you say momentum?
Oh.
I mean, it's just, the offseason has just been littered with positive announcements, driver announcements, sponsor announcements, team announcements. It's been just fabulous. So, but now I think it's time to get down to racing. We're a month away from the St. Pete Grand Prix, and just absolutely can't wait. And this guy in the shot here, yeah, he's fairly hungry, I think, to defend his crown.
Well, yeah, and as I mentioned, you know, Scott has not typically. Well, let me say this. It's not like he stuck it up, but I mean, he's had trouble repeating, you know, and typically the season hasn't gotten off to a very good start for Scott Dixon. St. Petersburg is one place that he has not had a lot of success at over the years for whatever the reason. Some guys just get snake bitten at racetracks. Of course, there's plenty of other places he owns. Mid-Ohio comes to mind, for instance. But yeah, I think if there's anybody that's poised to repeat as a champion, and as we mentioned before, he piles up points almost like no one else does.
And you know, in kind of retrospectively going back and thinking about the season last year, if there's one thing that Mike Hall and Scott Dixon can do better coming into this year, it is once they've picked a strategy, they need to stick to it. I feel like there were a few occasions last year, Mid-Ohio springs to mind as one of the occasions where they could have stuck with the two-stop strategy but decided to go away from it, whereas Alexander Rossi and his strategist Rob Edwards stuck with the two-stopper, and it paid off in the end. So I think it's just having that inner confidence within yourself to really stick with a strategy once you've committed to it, because the moment you jump off it, then you're kind of taking the worst of both strategies, as it were. So I think that's the one area where Alexander Rossi and Rob Edwards were so strong last year. They committed to a strategy and they stood by it for better or for worse, and more often than not it was a positive thing. So Scott Dixon's certainly going to have his work cut out with Alexander Rossi this year, but I can't wait to see the show, and certainly a lot of developments on both of these teams as well, as we now see Simon Pagenaud in the shot, who's looking to have a bit of a comeback year this year.
Well, in 2004, after he won the title in 03, he finished 10th in points. Now, he was runner-up in 08 after he won the title, in 09, rather, after he won the title. In 2014, he was 3rd in points. And, of course, let's see, in 2015 won that title, and he finished 6th the following year. So, you know, a couple of years he finished in the top 3 in points, but a couple of other years he struggled. But make no mistake about it, he wants to repeat badly. And I think also no one's really talked to him much about this. It is hard to believe with all the championships that he's won, and I know one is far better than none. It's a little surprising that he hasn't won more in May. But I think that's an indication of just how difficult it is for anybody to win.
Oh, for sure, and there's a huge element of luck as well involved there, right. and you just kind of see the rotten luck he's had. But at the same time, I think last year, for example, he really made the most of just being off pace throughout the race to make a strategy call that actually put him on the podium. So yeah, he's been snake bitten a few times there, but certainly made his luck on other occasions as well. And on board here with Simon Pagenaud, and I'm a pretty interested spectator here with the Team Penske cars, because we got that glimpse in the early practice session from Helio Castroneves, who was just super loose, and now it looks like the entire Team Penske organization have opted to way go softer on the rear end of those cars, to the point where the rear just looks absolutely planted, and now actually have quite a bit of understeer. So I wouldn't be surprised now if Simon Pagenaud comes into pit lane to try and maybe just take a little bit of that rear grip away, because looking to be overpowering the front just slightly.
Talking to a team principal last year for one of the newer teams, and the owner was talking to this guy. It was at St. Petersburg, in fact, and it was after a practice session, and the Penske cars came rolling back to the paddock, and this relatively new owner to the series says, okay, you've been around a while, explain to me what the difference is between what we're doing and what they're doing. And, you know, it's a single-car team. And as the three cars were coming back, he was talking about different shock positioning on the three Penske cars. He said that's what they're doing that we just can't do. And that's the benefit of not only the longevity of an organization, but it also is a clear indication of three guys that are sharing their information and doing so willingly because they understand that's part of the makeup. But more than anything else, it's just the sheer advantage of the numbers game of having a multi-car team.
Yeah, it is for sure, but it's got to be used in the right way because
Sure.
it can also be one of those things where you have so much information, but you don't know what to do with it all, and because of that, it just becomes a very confused picture. So I think what they've done is they have in place, obviously, a tremendous engineering force behind them that all work very well together, and that just drives them forward to become even more competitive. Getting a really interesting question here from Chad Irvine.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Who's asking, is it just me or the car's running an extreme amount of camber on their setup for today's test at COTA? And that's actually, I haven't had a chance to look at that myself up and down pit lane, but I would say that is very, very likely. And the reason for that is with all these long duration corners, you can imagine the cars roll over and are at maximum G load for a long period of time compared to, let's say, a road course like St. Petersburg. So typically around these road courses, you tend to run more camber than you would at a street course just because of how long these duration corners are. And also you have quite a bit of camber to a few of them. So therefore it almost becomes a bit like an oval like Iowa Speedway where you see the right-hand side of the car has a ton of camber, and that's because you just run that super high banked load on the cars for such a long period of time. So that is exactly that, to help with this infield section of the track from turns 1 essentially through turn 11, which is just back to back to back, and it just helps the car take a set once the car is rolled over and is in full G load.
A couple of questions gotten about the popularity of late of, for instance, like NASCAR does at Darlington throwback races where they use throwback paint schemes and salute to days gone by, and wondering if that idea might be forthcoming for the NTT IndyCar series. Sponsorships make that difficult, I think. Now, you know, maybe you could work out some sort of scheme, but we mentioned the Yellow Submarine that Penske. I mean, that is one that takes you back. And we have seen a handful of quote-unquote throwback paint schemes of late.
Yeah, no, you absolutely had, and I think the best probably throwback scheme that I could think back of was the car that Marco Andretti drove at ISM Raceway, the Kmart throwback to the old
yeah, they made that work.
Yeah, which looked absolutely spectacular. And on board here with Ryan Hunter-Reay coming through turn 19, and just loses the rear end a little bit, and then runs wide, and smartly enough just opens up his hands, waits until the end of the curb. Here we have Marco, just goes over that curb, and look at that, very, very smart, goes around what is now called, and this is Oliver Kell telling us these are actually officially by the FIA called baguette curbs.
All right.
And not sausage curbs. So the sausage curbs are very similar but run parallel to the track and usually on the inside. So apparently on the outside we have baguette curbs.
See, you can't get this information just anywhere.
So any type of food group we have out at COTA.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So no more sausage curb references. Okay, it's a baguette curb, and we'll keep track of that. Now, going back to the off by Ryan Hunter-Reay, as we get a look at what we're talking about there, up and close. That's a great shot, by the way, of exactly what it is we're talking about. And Anders, you can look, just the eye can tell you that is something that certainly you're going to notice when you hit it, and it's for sure going to upset the balance of the race car. So when a car breaks loose, where do you feel it first? Do you feel it in the steering wheel? Do you feel it in your rear end, or when do you know that for sure that it's gone?
Well, you feel it in your back first because you just feel that momentum of the rear just switching away, and it's kind of in that very moment that you hope that you have the ability to correct it with the steering wheel preemptively, so you don't have what we saw with Matthias Leist earlier, where the car breaks away from you before you even have a chance to make a correction to it. So, and that's again why it's so important to have a car that's compliant, something that breaks away not in a surprising manner, but when you feel the rear in your back and in your bottom side, when you feel the rear start slipping away from you, you proactively make that correction so it looks like a small slide. Whereas if it just violently snaps away from you, then you don't even have a chance.
So to that end, certain drivers set up the car, the feel of the car, literally in separate parts of their bodies. No two drivers that I think are rarely identical. So for you personally, where did you want to feel good? Hands, legs, rear end, back, where?
I think for me, all of my feeling essentially came through my back and through my core. That's how I felt all the movement in the car, and that's very much how I'd react to the car. And obviously, to your point, that probably changes as we see Ryan Hunter-Reay here putting on another set of scrubs, and I think that depends also very much on kind of what type of driving style you are. And I think the two drivers that spring to mind on that is Alexander Rossi and Simon Pagenaud. The two couldn't have any more different driving styles than you can imagine. Alexander Rossi loves a car that is super grippy on the front end, something that essentially the car rotates itself in the middle of the corner. You have to use very little steering input, but it requires you to be ultra smooth with the steering wheel to not upset the balance of the car. Simon Pagenaud, however, is someone that really likes to have a planted rear end and something that he has to provoke the rotation in the car. So that means typically standing on the brake all the way into the corner, using the steering wheel very aggressively to rotate the car. And I think the really cool thing about that is that different style and preference suits one track better than the other. So around a street course, the loose driving style of Alexander Rossi and around these sharp corners that we see here at COTA, such as turn 11, turn 12, that's really going to help a car that rotates very quickly. Whereas at a track with longer duration corners, such as a Barber Motorsports Park or Mid-Ohio, that's when you might see that planted rear end be a bit more beneficial. So it really is fascinating to see these drivers then adapting their driving style and the setup of the car to each track individually.
Mark James, Anders Krohn, and Jake Query. Speaking of Jake, let's bring him in for pit road. Jake.
Beach as he straps back in. Now, he had gotten out of the car earlier this session, went out. They made a few adjustments to the car itself, just the overall balance. But here's what I want to watch. And Anders, something really I think is going to be interesting here with Zach Beach. He had a very good lap at the end of the early session this morning, but then he had said in the early afternoon, I should say, that he was really curious to see how this track changed in the afternoon. What we have here is a fresh set of the Firestone Firehawks. These are sticker tires, essentially, so brand new grip. Zach Beach had said that he felt like those tires only get about 2 to 3 laps, and then all of a sudden you start to lose a little bit of that grip. So it might be an interesting thing here to watch, guys, when Beach goes out, to compare his first 2 laps to then see whether or not his prediction was correct, and the fact that all of a sudden that car starts to get a little bit more slippery, and that grip that Kara Adams had talked about, trying to find exactly Firestone's compound that presents the perfect combination of challenge but at the same time reliability for these drivers. Zach Beach is about to give us, I think, a real good window as to exactly what that number of laps is.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us to follow that. And luckily for us, we have the crack crew at IMS Productions behind us producing this piece. So I'm sure they can help us track this next run here of Zach Beach on those new tires from the very outlap, figuring out exactly how he brings the tires up to temperature. And does he go for 1.5 full warm-up laps before he goes for his flyer, or does he go out of the pit lane and directly on his first flyer go for the quickest lap possible? So this will be very intriguing, and again, something that they'll take a lot of knowledge from to apply into the race weekend.
You realize where that kid was 2 years ago? 2 years ago.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I mean, you know, it had a couple of one-offs that year, got thrown in for J.R. Hildebrand and Barber, and I mean, other than that, I mean, he was with us. I was listening the other day. I go back and listen to some stuff in the past and make some notes and everything. He worked the pits with us at Long Beach a couple of years ago.
Yeah, no,
you know, and there he was, what, in the top 5 at Long Beach last year.
Yeah, and to think that he stepped in and had such a great rate of progression, despite the fact that he's been out of the car for the better part of a year. You know, all he'd done for that last year was essentially just driving IndyCar 2-seaters, which, yeah, it's track time, but it's nowhere near anything like a proper race car in something like an Indy Lights car or even a part-time IndyCar effort. So a lot of respect for what he's done there, but I think that speaks volumes of kind of his mentality in approaching it very much like a sponge, realizing he had 3 full-time teammates around him with so much experience and just taking advantage of that.
Well, I mean, let's face it, as you mentioned, 2-seater or whatever, pace car rides, he was here all the time in the paddock, FaceTime, talking, shaking hands, And even when he stepped away and raced for Bilardi for a year, you know that he maintained his relationship with Michael Andretti, that the one that brought him up through the Road to Indy program. He didn't burn that bridge, and that's smart on his part. And same thing with Connor Daly. I mean, Connor Daly hasn't had a full-time ride for a while, but he's at the racetrack every weekend. Now, you need to have the resources to be able to do that. But I know, Zach was talking about, 2, 3 guys, 4 guys in a hotel room over the course of a weekend. I mean, he wasn't flying around in private jets while he was looking for a ride. That's for darn sure. Well, he was driving to a lot of races, too.
Well, put it this way. I knew I'd retired as a driver when I stopped bringing my helmet to the track. Because literally opportunities have come up because of that. Connor Daly, right, 2-3 years ago when Moran was it that was going to be in the car for
Rocky
Dale
Moran
Coyne.
Jr., that's right.
Exactly. Broke his thumb. Boom. Connor Daly is on site and ready to go. And I know it's such a long shot, but at the same time, if you're not there, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. And so I think that's exactly what Zach Veach did so well. That's what Connor Daly has done, and great to see him back in the Indy 500 this year with a genuinely proper program that all things coming together, he could win the race.
And it's getting tougher to do. You talk about that walking around the paddock with a helmet. You almost need your helmet and your seat now. That's how specialized the cockpits have become, and the pedal placement and all that in these cars.
Yeah, no, you absolutely do. So I think that's where someone like a Connor Daly probably has an arrangement with Dallara for them to always bring the seat to every single race with him. And speak of the guy, there he is. Connor Daly. Will be great to see him back in action at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and this is exactly what he needs to be doing right now, soaking up all the information from Alexander Rossi's pit box, just learning the nuances of what him and the engineers are going through on every single session.
Well, by the time we get to the end of the season, he's either going to love us or he's going to hate us because we jinxed him if he hasn't had a good year. Labeling him the prohibitive favorite to win the championship this season. I hope we don't jinx him in that regard, but just I don't know, everything I saw of the course of last season, and as you said, that magnificent drive at Sonoma to close out the season, everything that he had to come through, just a salvage, a good finish, and you can see one thing's for sure, he doesn't hesitate to throw it around the racetrack.
No, he does not at all. And look at this here. Oh, little bit too aggressive there for Alexander Rossi as he comes through that turn 8, turn 9 combination. I think we're going to see a lot of action there. And the reason why they're also antsy in that particular portion of the track is because that run down towards turn 11 is so crucial and potentially setting up a pass. So you really need to get a perfect exit out of there.
Pat Caporelli, a good friend from IndyCar Media, says enough talk about baguettes and sausage. We're making her hungry in the media center. So enough talk about food references, I guess, as it pertains to.
Well, so there you have it. We shall leave it at that.
Yeah.
Let's see here, going through some more questions. IndyCar weatherman asking, how's the weather? Well, one word for you. Perfect.
Yes.
Yep.
I agree.
Let's leave that at there.
Okay, so now, main straightaway. We just saw a peak now. As Colton Herta made his way down that straightaway. The sunshine disappears quickly from that straightaway down the stretch. But this is one of those places where between the sun and the shade, it's not going to have that much impact on this racetrack.
It's more about the wind conditions and the overall heat and humidity levels around here. Yeah, the sun pretty much hitting the entirety of this track. And did you see that? Just how well that car of Colton Herta took that curve there. I believe that was, let's see here, that would have been turn 7, and he clobbered that inside orange. I can't say it anymore, so it's not
go
sausage
ahead.
curve.
You know you want to. Go ahead.
A vegan sausage curve. Let's call it that. He clobbered that thing, and the car just took it so well. So they have something figured out here with the shocks. That looked beautiful.
This is so valuable for this kid, is it not? I mean, to have this kind of seat time here.
No, it most definitely is, and just to kind of have 2 full days of testing here. Oh, big lockup coming into turn 12, way on the outside, avoiding the sleeping policeman, as we're now going to start calling him.
You see that we mentioned earlier the commitment, the partnership between the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the NTT IndyCar Series. You see that Speedway logo that's been popped on the side of a lot of these race cars. And again, 4,000 locations nationwide. the convenience stores, the Speedway, and look for more and more activation as that partnership continues to grow and expand throughout the course of this 2019 campaign.
And you know, we actually had a question about the cars sounding a little bit meaner this year, and to the best of my knowledge, they haven't done anything, so it could just be the Speedway fuel.
It could be. Yeah. That's a great point. That's a nice tie-in, Anders. Well done.
Look at that.
So Rossi is no longer P1. Surprise, surprise, Will Power it goes to the top of time and scoring. Ferrucci is now third. Ericsson is fourth. Rosenquist is fifth. Pagenaud, Colton Herta, James Hinchcliffe, Scott Dixon, and Ryan Hunter-Reay are top 10. Pickett, Veach, Harvey, Mateus Laced, and Graham Rahal through position 15. That lap time, 1:48.03.19.
Yeah, and Spencer Pickett here on looks like somewhat of a smooth lap. Not sure if he's pushing it here, if he's just on a warm-up lap, but so far looking pretty good here for Spencer Pickett. Actually, fairly nice and smooth. A little bit too much understeer there as he goes through. What is that? Turn 15.
And the nice thing about, if you're logged on and you're watching IndyCar Race Control, is you'll see commentary added. For instance, let you know what cars are going to pit road and off the pit road. They just mentioned a pit speed warning for Colton Herta. So for a guy like him, not accustomed necessarily to making pit stops, not much experience with that, certainly in the NTT IndyCar series. Again, that's all part of the learning process for Colton as he gets ready to compete this season.
Yeah, it is for sure, and he's just got to be a sponge here throughout the course of this season. So many experienced people around him, and he just really needs to soak it all in. And again, as we talked about this morning, just really progress every single session throughout the course of the season. Getting a question here from Bobby Eberly, who actually used to race in the Pro Mazda series, asking, track rubber aside, can you contrast cool temps giving you more horsepower and warm temps giving you more grip? What do you like? Well, tell you what, Bobby, I actually like both. I would prefer to have in the afternoon when the track temp is still hot, but when the ambient temperature is coming down, that's when we can start seeing some really blistering times. And I think that's what we're going to see here right towards the end of this. As the sun starts setting, we're still going to have that 70-some degree track temp, but the ambient is going to go down, and that's when we generate that. We have that saturated air to develop the most amount of downforce, the most amount of horsepower, but then still having that warm asphalt. So that is the ideal time to go for some absolute flyers. So how about that? There's no compromise. I want to know.
They do want to remind you folks that in 2019 NBC will be the home of the NTT IndyCar Series. NBC Sports Platforms, the exclusive home for 2019, featuring all of their broadcasters. NTT NTT Series, IndyCar Series will air on NBC and NBCSN. All track action plus content available on the subscription base. IndyCar Pass on NBC Sports Gold. You can get it now for $49.99. After March 10th, the price goes to $54.99, but that's still a great deal throughout the course of the season. Of course, IndyCar, 60% more network races this season, 8 broadcasts, including the 103rd Indianapolis 500 presented by Gainbridge on NBC. Final 2 races of the season in Portland and Monterey also air on NBC, and of course it begins March 10th in St. Petersburg, Florida. That race is the first of 9 races to be telecast on NBCSN.
Tell you what, Mark James, I just figured out the Valentine's Day gift for my lovely wife. It is IndyCar Pass on NBC Gold. Well, ask for a better gift.
And not that that's not a good gift for a race fan, but just let me know how well that's received, if you will. Let's go to Jake Query on pit road.
Brian Barnhart is the president for Harding Racing. You were just talking about Colton Herta and this promising young driver. And Brian, let's begin with this. Colton Herta, of course, his father, Brian Herta, is with Andretti Autosport. Announcement earlier today of a technical partnership between Andretti Technical and Harding Racing. For guys like me that aren't the sharpest, what exactly does that mean?
We're really excited about that relationship. Andretti Technologies is going to be supplying their damper technology for us. One of the few areas open for development on an Indy car, and they've got a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of technical expertise invested in the shock program. We're going to be the benefactors of that. It's also a challenge to be a one-car team in this very competitive IndyCar series. Unfortunately, we lost Pato earlier this week, but we're still going to move forward as best we can with this one-car relationship. Colton Herta, we're going to give him every opportunity to be as competitive as he can be in his rookie campaign, and we're going to count on that technical relationship with Andretti Technologies and the database they have through that super team over there at Andretti Autosport, and hopefully we'll reap the benefits of that.
Does that mean that over the course of a race weekend, really at any time, you can go down and transfer information with Andretti? How exactly does it work?
There'll be certainly an exchange of information on it, but it's not quite as good as being true teammates, but it's better than not being and simply being competitors. So there will be an exchange of information, shared technologies, shared information. Hopefully we can make each side better.
Pato Award obviously is the reigning Lights championship champion. He has the scholarship money. Is there any chance that could be revisited over the course, or is this set as a one-car team?
Right now at Harding Steinbrenner, we are full steam ahead with Colton, and just happy to have him in the seat. He validated everything that we thought about him this morning. Done a great job, been on pace all day here today. Considering this is our first test of the winter, I think it's great. You know, he was fantastic, won his class at the Daytona 24 hours and is right on pace immediately here. We're just hoping we can continue that as long as we can.
Lastly, let me ask you, Brian, when you have a young driver who is as promising as Colton, there's got to be a balance, I would think, between wanting him to go fast, but also to kind of slow down and take it easy. Does that make sense, and how do you find that balance?
You leave it up to him. He finds that balance out there. We just try to provide him the tools to do his job as best he can, and we've tried to do that with the relationships we put in place last summer. Worked real hard to get all that in place, and hopefully we'll bear the benefits of that all season long.
Appreciate the time as always. We'll let you get back to work here.
All right, thanks, Jake.
All right, Colton Herta, of course, is in the car. Brian Barnhart, pretty good voice to have, telling you and guiding you through, as of course Brian now the president for Harding Racing. Yeah, race steward, race director, race control president, whatever the position. Over the years that Brian Barnhart was with the IndyCar series, was as accessible as anyone could be expected to be, and that's not changed at all. And he gave some very honest, straightforward answers to that situation involving Pato Award.
Yeah, no, that's very, very helpful to have for sure. And now just fingers crossed that we see Pato on the grid in very short order, because he definitely deserves to be. And yeah, fingers crossed it all comes together.
With situations like that on the business side of it, which you were reluctant to talk about earlier, not asking you to name names here. Frustrations over situations like that, part of the decision-making process that led to you stepping out of the race car and kind of developing Co-Force and taking your career in the direction that it's gone?
Yeah, I wouldn't say, that exact situation,
right.
but certainly, yeah, the kind of uncertainty of being an up-and-coming driver, of kind of year to year never truly knowing where you're going to drive or if you're going to drive at all. And I think every driver kind of gets to a point where you decide, okay, I'm willing to keep that uncertainty in my life and do it that way, or you're not. And in my particular case, it was just I felt like I had done that for the better part of decade and a half, 2 decades, and I felt like I was ready to move on to the next phase of my life. Now, in the case of Pato Award, definitely not the case.
No.
That is a guy that's going to race for many, many, many decades to go, and certainly from a skill set perspective, far above and beyond what I could have ever imagined being. So I think he's going to have a bright career ahead, and I think as long as he figures something out for this season, then he'll be stronger for it.
So, question for you, especially as you moved up, any deals that you thought were in the works or were close, that for whatever the reason evaporated? If you had all of that money today, would you be here doing this? Were you ever in that position where you really thought you had some really good deals put together, and then for whatever the reason, at the last minute just evaporated?
Oh, I could write a book. Yeah. I literally could write a book about every deal that you thought you had lined up, and everything was just going to perfectly line up. But to be honest, that doesn't change even now that I'm more on the business development side of it. You still have those, and the biggest thing is you need to have quality in what you're proposing and working on, but you also need to have a huge funnel so you can kind of pour everything that you possibly can into this funnel, and hoping that something really shakes out into a quality product. So it's still a very tricky business, racing is, but it certainly helps when you have momentum like we do in the series right now.
Matt Brabham was the most honest of anyone that I have ever talked to about that. He came up through the Mazda Road to Indy, absolutely set the world on fire. Had his struggles the year he was at Indy Lights, but I think he's proven time and time again he's one of those guys I think can find a way to climb in a grocery cart and make it go fast. But I remember at St. Pete, after his year at Indy Lights, he came in the booth and I said, okay, we'll ask you the question we always ask. Anything in the works, anything? He said, I'm not going to be like a lot of guys. He said, I got nothing. He said, I'm not close on anything. I've tried to talk to people. I'm not getting anywhere. He said, the challenge for me, this is the first time in my career that I've ever had to do this because someone's always done it for me as someone's ever, has always approached me. And that's a guy with a world of talent who has trouble, securing something for them. But I thought his honesty was refreshing because you hear it, you see it all the time. Well, yeah, we hope to run 2 cars next year. Or yes, we hope to run 3 cars next year. We hope to run this driver next year. We hope to have a race team. I mean, you couldn't build a paddock big enough with all the teams that supposedly were going to be
yeah.
that never came to fruition.
Well, I think the key there is to eliminate the word hope.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And if you do that, then you quickly get down to reality.
But I think over the course of the past few years, like for instance the announcement by Kyle Kaiser a little bit earlier today with New Coast Racing, and they're sponsoring that car for the race here at COTA. That's a business based in Austin, Texas. And I think we've seen Ray Hall and others who have done a great job of building regional sponsorships and rotating sponsorships and understanding that the business climate has made it very difficult to go after that big fish. So they found a way to be really creative, and I think it's beneficial to the sport as a whole.
I think so, and because of that, we also get these awesome liveries. We're looking at a guy that's been driving some of the coolest liveries around the last few years. If you remember back to Portland, he had that Gorilla livery in that awesome, purple and white livery that just looked fantastic. So I think also what that's enabling is kind of smaller businesses to get a sample of what IndyCar is all about, both from a business to business and a marketing perspective. So it really is a great thing in the global scheme of things, and it means that if you have 20 smaller sponsors, if you lose one of them, the percentage of impact on that isn't as big as if you only have 2 big ones and you lose one of them. So I think for the greater good of the sport, it's good for sure.
So maybe Mark Robinson, Arnie, somebody, maybe even our good friends from Trackside Online who are listening, Steve Whitaker, Patrick Steffen, who are here, help us out with this. The last time IndyCar and F1 ran the same circuit, lay out for a rough comparison. So if somebody, do you happen to, I don't recall that when F1 and IndyCar ran the same circuit.
That must have been Montreal, right? In the early 2000s with back in the Champ Car days, I think so.
Okay, I'll get a text or a tweet. We'll wait on that while we take a lap with Ryan Hunter-Reay. Ryan Hunter-Reay as he gets set to complete a lap. Thank you, Steve Whittick, Trackside Online, who is here. Montreal 2006, the last time F1 IndyCar ran the same circuit. Anders Crow didn't have the year, but he knew it was Montreal, and that has left me impressed. To Jake Query and Will Power.
Little over an hour left in this session, Mark, and Will Power's out of the car. Is the day done for you, or just a temporary break here before you go back out to finish it out?
Yeah, we're just taking a break, save our tires. We kind of want to have, good 4 sets tomorrow, so we'll run a new set at the end of the day, run out the current set. So yeah, we're just waiting, try and make some decisions on setup changes.
Let's talk about this track in general. How tire sensitive is this track? It seems there are varying opinions. For you, you start to feel it go away when?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, after 2 laps, it starts to go away. It's a super tire-sensitive track. You've got very long corners, and you've got a lot of them, so new tires and grip counts for a lot.
You like this particular track. It's obviously a state-of-the-art venue, but what about from a driving standpoint? Take me through what it's like to go around.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great track. Very, very, very fun, very technical. You got a variety of every sort of corner you can imagine, so and a great facility too, like phenomenal. Really, I think everyone's happy we come here, and yeah, I definitely am.
For you personally, Will Power, in terms of the off season, you know, things are a little bit different now. You're a family guy, you're a father. Has that changed? Just, I'm not going to say obviously your priority, but just the way your time is spent.
Yeah, I mean, I had a great off season, enjoying it with my family. Went back to Australia. Just happier in my life right now. I just kind of at that age where you go through different phases in your life, and I'm just content. I realize it's pretty short. Life doesn't last long. Your racing career is pretty short too, so you got to love it and enjoy it while you got it.
Just mean you're getting old?
No, just maturing.
Honestly, what is the window for you when you look at it? I mean, obviously, you still appear to be in your prime. Do you feel it that way?
I do, yeah. I feel fitter than ever, sharper than ever, and fast as ever. So, you know, I keep getting better, but so is everyone else in IndyCar. It's a very tight series, but I see myself being able to race another 5 years for sure.
I want to ask you also, before we let you go, with Helio Castroneves coming over just for this test, and we know he's only doing the Grand Prix at Indy and the Indy 500, at least as of now.
Yeah.
Do you use some of the information he gets? I know it's for him to reacclimate to the car, but do you benefit from it as well?
Yeah, we do actually. He's out there right now doing a long run, trying to give us some data on a whole new set of tires and everything. So yeah, full tank. So we'll use him for stuff that we stuff that we don't want to do.
You're not very good on those Penske games, by the way, so maybe you need to work on that in the offseason.
Well, we'll see about this year. His teams and all that. I think I did better, but it's a bit of fun.
You got the big one, though. You got Indianapolis. We'll let you get back to work here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Mark, that's Will Power.
Yeah, I would say your life would change a little bit and cause you to calm a little bit and feel like you're in a better place after you win the greatest race in the world, the Indianapolis 500. It's going to do a lot for your disposition, I think.
Oh, for sure. I mean, especially considering the fact that, I mean, for the last decade, we've essentially referred to him as the fastest driver around. And so to kind of have that badge on you, to have won a championship, but to not have an Indy 500 win, it's got to be a huge monkey on your back. And yeah, finally getting that probably released a ton of pressure for him, and now being able to have a slightly more relaxed approach. And you've even seen it in his social media stuff over the course of the winter. He's been more open. He's been sharing more of his personal life, joking around. So I think it's to the benefit of everyone, to be honest.
Do you remember in any form of motorsports anywhere anyone who is more proficient at winning poles than Will Power?
No. I mean, no.
I mean, his record
it's that simple, right?
It's sick.
Yeah, no, it's that simple. I mean, I guess the only comparison you can draw, even though the circumstances are very, very different, is someone like a Michael Schumacher or Lewis Hamilton. I mean, those are the only ones from a sheer numbers perspective that can match that. And outside of that, no, Will Power is the king.
Pat Caparelli weighed in, by the way, Montreal, reminding me that's her home track. And Alonso won the F1 race, and Bourdais won the Champ Car IndyCar race that year. Steve Whittick gave me that information. So we did get help from a couple of sources with the question as to F1 and IndyCar running the same circuit in the same season. That was 2006 in Montreal. So back to Will's point, Jake's question about what Helio contributes. Okay, for the layperson that may not know, explain. Will said it's something that none of us really want to do. They've got Helio doing a quote-unquote long run. So explain to the layperson what a long run is.
So a long run is basically just to figure out how is the car going to develop over the course of a race stint. So the assumed length that they're expecting a stint to be before you'd make a pit stop. So you start off on a new set of tires as you would on any given stint in the race, and then you go through with a full tank of fuel, and you're basically just adjusting to the best that you can with fuel trim, with the adjustments you have inside the cockpit, but without the ability to come in and pit for any changes. So he's just out there right now seeing how quickly do the tires fall off, when the tires fall off, what adjustments do I have to make in the cockpit, what do I have to do from a driver perspective, and then he'll use all of that data to then transfer that knowledge onto the other team cars so that they can proactively then make changes to the cars to make them better in the long run.
And his willingness to do so is what allows Will Power to take a break and talk to us.
Yeah, exactly. So it works out for everyone.
That's right. It's a win-win. Colton Herta, Will Power, Alexander Rossi, Santino Ferrucci, Spencer Pigot, the top 5, then Ericsson, Rosenquist, Pagenaud, R.C. Enerson, and James Hinchcliffe, the top 10. Dixon, Ryan Hunter-Ray, Bourdais, Veach, and Jack Harvey, the top 15. Do want to mention it. We didn't do it earlier today. Sorry about that, but certainly want to give a shout out to our good friends, the stars of tomorrow in this series. I guess we did make a brief mention of Zachary Clayman, who's gone back to Indy Lights this year. Lights are testing here as well. 10 cars here this weekend. A lot of familiar names. A couple of drivers returning, but also some new faces moving up through the road to Indy, which I think is going to make for another compelling season in Indy Lights.
And I think the level this year is going to be just as high as it was last year. Obviously, we saw Pato Ward and Colton Herta last year kind of run away with things, but when you look at at least the initial list of who we expect is going to be in the series this year, I think it's going to be super, super tight with Rinus VK and Oliver Askew moving up from the Indy Pro 2000 category, Julian Falcaro coming in over from Europe, and Logan Sargent as well, with so much experience from single-seaters racing in Europe as well over the last few years. And then, of course, the Ryan Normans, the Dalton Kellis returning, and then add to that Zachary Clayman DeMello with recent IndyCar experience stepping back into Indy Lights. And I've got split views on that situation. The one is you can take all the experience you gained in the IndyCar and apply that in the slightly slower Indy Lights car, which can help you a ton. But at the same time, if you don't mentally adapt yourself to the fact that you can't drive this slower car as hard as you could with a faster car, you can actually end up overdriving. And we've seen a lot of that over the course of the last few years, where when someone takes a step back, they struggle to actually literally do just that. Take a step back with your brake zones, with your turning points, with everything that you're doing. Everything just happens a touch slower than that in an IndyCar. And so that's going to be the crucial bit here for Zachary Clayman DeMello is just kind of taking that one step back and making sure he doesn't overdrive the car.
To that point, Phoenix comes to mind when Zach Veach went back to Indy Lights. Zach will tell you the significance and the importance of that $1 million scholarship as a shot to move up. Once you go back there, you put a little pressure on yourself, and when you do that, you might make a mistake here or there.
Oh, for sure. And don't forget these two cars on completely different tires as well. And tires is probably the single biggest influencer of how you drive a car. The Firestone tire here, you can typically drive quite aggressively. You can use a lot of steering input in the middle of the corner. You can really lean on the tire, whereas the Cooper tire on the Indy Lights car is a little bit more load sensitive. You have to drive it just a bit more carefully. You can't lean on it as hard. You have to be a bit more careful with your steering input. So then you really need to readjust that in your head, because if you then try and drive the Indy Lights car to the Firestone way of driving from the Indy car, yeah, you can easily overdrive it.
Yeah, but Carlin taking a step back and rejoining that program, which is huge with the success that they had with their brief foray into Indy Lights, and of course Bellardi and Andretti and others. So there's certainly there's a lot of talent in that field, and it's always exciting to see which one of those contenders rise to the top.
No, it will be for sure. And again, with that huge $1 million check at the end of the season, yeah, there's a lot to fight for, that's for sure.
So, again, about an hour remaining in this session, and what a session it has been. Colton Herta continues P1. Will Power, Alexander Rossi, Ferrucci, and Pigot the top 5. Ericsson, Felix Rosenquist, Simon Pagenaud, R.C. Enerson, and James Hinchcliffe. Scott Dixon is 11th quick, then Ryan Hunter-Ray and Sebastian Bourdais. Zach Veach and Jack Harvey complete the top 15. Then Mateus Lace, Takuma Sato, Graham Rahal, that Jones, Joseph Newgarden, and Elio Castroneves. Max Chilton, Marco Andretti, Kyle Kaiser, and Tony Kanaan. That's a good look again, that just over the top of the head of Elio Castroneves, watching him pilot that Pennzoil car.
Have a look at that through 16, 17, 18. Can you see these tires starting to fall off? on this car right here. He was just correcting so much now, and coming into the final corner, look for him to just slowly but surely apply the power here. Doesn't want to get too much wheel spin. That was a very nice throttle application there, but yeah, you can really see he's hanging on this late in the stint.
When the tires go away, as you suggest, is the steering wheel the first place that you feel that?
Well, it's sort of a combination of everything. You just feel a lot more movement in the rear of the car, and as a result, you have to slow down the movement of your steering wheel. And the same goes for your brake point and the release. You typically have to release the brake just a smidge earlier to not lock it up going in, and then the throttle application has to be much more smooth of an application. So it is a very, very difficult thing, and yeah, constantly moving target. And on board here with James Hinchcliffe, this is my favorite part of the track here. Turn 3, 4, 5, 6, and then this really, really tightens up here. So important to bring it back to the right to set it up here for turn 7, and then turn 8 up this long hill here. And here's where we've seen all these drivers run so wide here. So on the power, don't run too wide. Now on the power and full throttle down the hill here up to the braking zone. Slide uphill here for the brake zone to turn 11. Got to get a good exit here. Get it squared off. Open up your hands. Open up your hands. On power, first gear, second gear, third gear, and up through the gears you go, and down that humongous back straight. And just over on the left of our screen, you can see that tremendous viewing tower, which gives you a 360 panorama view of this entire facility.
And the floor of that, from what I understand, is plexiglass. So it's
yes.
not for the faint of heart.
No, it is not. It is pretty unnerving. Yeah. Nice, smooth. Oh, there we have a good view of it. Look at that. How about that? Yeah. And I've made a promise to myself to try and tackle those steps this afternoon here, to actually try and run up there. But as I'm comfortably seated here, as I'm comfortably seated in the booth, that's probably not very likely to happen at this point.
Okay, well, that's a good idea. Sounds good. Good for you.
Yeah, yes. It's the thought that matters, right?
Well, if you don't mind, we're going to give you a bit of a break. No. Ryan Norman is here, so we're going to have Ryan join me for just a few minutes, so we can talk a little bit about his test session here in Indy Lights.
I feel like my presence is important, so I couldn't possibly go away to climb.
You don't have to leave the booth. You can stay in the booth. but we want to talk to Ryan for just a few minutes here. And so thank you, Anders, for making way for Ryan Norman. Ryan, welcome. Happy to have you with us. Your thoughts and impressions of this incredible facility here in Austin, Texas.
This is easily becoming my favorite track. I mean, it's a proper racetrack. Obviously, this is my first time here, but it's super fast and it's super fun so far.
What's the most challenging portion of the racetrack?
I would have to say probably getting 6, 7, 8, 9 correct. You kind of have to give up a little bit through 7 to get a good run, through 8 and 9 get a good power down through there. So that's a pretty technical part of the track. Also, 19 is a little tricky as well. Loses grip mid-corner a little bit there, so it's kind of hard to roll speed through there, but yeah, it's a really fun track so far.
You can do a simulator, you can take a track walk, all of those things. You can take it at warm-up speed, and I know you didn't mention that as a challenging portion, but what runs through your mind the first time you come off of the final turn and head down the straightaway and see that massive 130-foot climb? What's running through your head when you see that coming at you?
Yeah, so I did a little bit of sim work here, and that hill's way bigger in real life. I mean, it's like a ski slope. I mean, it's pretty crazy. The track walk, the tugger could barely get up it. So, yeah, it was pretty cool.
Ryan Norman joins us, of course, from Andretti Autosports. So we talked about the tire degradation for the Indy cars. They fall off after about 2 laps. Is that similar?
We got about 3 to 4 laps out of our new tires, and then they were completely shot. Last year, we were able to do some cool down laps with our tires on new tire runs, and that sometimes worked, but here it seems like you really got to get it done in lap 2, 3, 4. You're not going to be able to get it done.
So from a driver's perspective, sitting here right now, what do you know now? What do you think makes you more confident and more comfortable going into 2019 as compared to, say, this time a year ago?
I would just say experience. I mean, I gained tons of experience last year. Obviously, I had really good teammates in Colton Herta and Pato Award. So I was able to learn a lot from them. was able to break through for my first win, so carried that momentum into this offseason, and doing a lot of things in the car and outside the car to be able to make a proper run for the championship.
I don't call many lights races anymore, but I always help out at Gateway, and I was calling the backstretch for that one, and I saw that coming about 7 or 8 laps before it actually happened.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of planning. I thought I could probably get it done a little bit sooner than that, but my tires were pretty run off after that, so knew I had to make it happen and then hold him off for like 1-2 laps because he obviously had a little bit fresher fronts because he wasn't following the car the rest of the race. So yeah, it was a great race.
Now, I won't say. I guess it does. It has to give a boost to your confidence. But from a driver's perspective, if you didn't think you could win, you wouldn't do this. So,
for sure.
Is it more in your mind? Does that give validation when you win? Is that for you validation for everyone else? And you saying to them, "See, I can do this."
Yeah, and it was definitely for me myself. It also, let me know that I can do this and I can win against these guys, and that definitely was a motivational boost for me, and that helped a lot.
I'll say, dating myself here, some of the first concerts that I ever went to involved Journey, and I'm guessing it was long before you were ever born. So how cool is this to be sponsored by Journey and your relationship with them?
I'm actually a really big fan of rock and roll, so this is really cool for me. They're one of my favorite bands, obviously, and it's cool to be able to meet these guys in person. Not only have them on my car, but just to meet these guys, it was an honor for sure.
Anders wants me to tell you, don't stop believing. See, I wouldn't go that cheesy, but that's Anders Krohn stuff.
I heard a lot of those last year.
I bet you did.
A lot of those.
Well, more wins and hopefully a championship is in the offing.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely want to stay consistent this year and get as many wins and podiums as possible.
And I hate to tell you this, but you're now the old man. You're the veteran in the
I know,
series.
right?
You know that. All right, Ryan, best of luck to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Glad to have you with us. And we look forward to following his fortunes throughout the course of the season. Always great to watch these. It's one thing I love about following this series is, my goodness, we get to watch these guys develop and turn into the James Hinchcliffes and the Charlie Kimballs and guys like that. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I think that was actually my favorite race of the year last year was Gateway, and it was such an amazing battle there with Colton Herta and fighting tooth and nail for that win, back and forwards, and you don't often get to see those types of races at Indy Lights, but it was awesome. So yeah, Ryan's certainly shown that he can do the job.
Well, to your point, from your perspective as a driver, kind of echo his sentiments. I mean, you can win, you can be competitive. You have to have that kind of belief and confidence in order for you to be able to do this. But is it vindication when you win, showing everybody else that you belong here?
I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah,
I definitely think so. But to Ryan's point, I think it's just validation in yourself, kind of the belief in that. Yeah, everything I've been working for is actually been worth it. So, yep.
So, Mark Jaynes, Anders Krohn, as we, before you know it, time has flown by, and we're now less than an hour into this practice session, and boy, the information that we have gotten has been really, really good from Jake Query down on pit road, and we appreciate the access that these teams and drivers have given us throughout the course of this test session today, for sure. And folks, keep the questions coming. I mean, we have enjoyed the interaction, and fans have checked in literally from all over the globe, which is really, really cool.
And I think the one question here from Marvin Blue, and considering we're a half a day into preseason testing.
Marvin's not gotten much work. He's been tweeting us on a regular basis.
So I figure now, since we're a half a day into preseason testing, we should already know who can win the championship in the Indy 500. So Mark Jaynes, what are you thinking?
We've already jinxed Alexander Rossi. I mean, like I said, we're either going to look. Everything every now and then, it's like when Will Power finally won his championship. He had come so very, very close. As a matter of fact, I believe 3 years in a row he lost it in the season finale, and then he wasn't in championship contention, but he got a win at Fontana to close out the season, and that got a huge monkey off his back, because, I mean, there was one point where he crashed early in the race. I think it was year Ryan Hunter-Ray won the championship, and there was no one around him. I mean, the car just broke loose, and I'll never forget Jake Query's call in turn 2 there at Fontana. And I really think that Will won his championship. It started the climb to win his championship of the Quest off of that win to close out the regular season at Fontana. And I think that's kind of what I saw from Alexander Rossi the second half of the season.
Yeah. So, but to your point, though, if you win the final race, then it should really be Ryan Hunter-Reay that wins the championship this year, right?
Well, but would that be a surprise?
No, not at all. But
because, as we talked about earlier, some of the issues that Ryan Hunter-Reay had last year were not necessarily of his doing. He had some rotten luck at times. But you talk about a guy who has a knack for also getting a car into the top 5 when it might not even be a top 5 car. I mean, he's somewhat similar to Scott Dixon.
I would fully agree with that statement. And I think that's a difficult call there, Marvin. Blue. Preseason favorites, I think, that is a difficult one for sure. I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, to see Will Power go back-to-back at the Indy 500. He was so dominant there last year, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him carry that form. And as for the championship, wouldn't be surprised if Scott Dixon got it. Same time, wouldn't be surprised if Alexander Rossi or Ryan Hunter-Reay snuck in there. So,
well, we mentioned earlier that if while we speculate that the month of May, sweeping both races and qualifying as well as he did, narrowly missing the pole for the 500, that while we think that it will never be duplicated, let's be honest, if anybody could duplicate it, it would be Will Power.
Agreed. Andreas Sutter from Sweden asking if we'll give a warm welcome to all the Swedes staying up late to watch IndyCar practice for the first time. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I think you're in for an amazing season, both with Felix and Marcus behind the wheel. You have a lot to look forward to, and I think you have some amazing rookies representing Sweden, and it'll be great, not just for Sweden, but for all of Scandinavia, in fact, with coverage all over Scandinavia.
Do you have an agent?
Come again?
Do you have an agent?
Do I have an agent?
If you don't, you should hire our good friend Paul Kelly. He calls you a rock star in the booth. He calls you smart, analytical, and engaging. He digs your commentary.
Wow. Well, Paul, I'll send you that $20 bill that we discussed later.
Paul's a good guy. He's been around motorsports a long time and a good guy. Thanks for listening and for the kind words for our driver analyst here. We agree with that, Paul. I hate to say nice things about him in front of him. I really do. But what's true is true, and that certainly is true for sure.
Well, you get to have a lot of fun here talking about race cars and potential outcomes and actual outcomes, and get to see some of the greatest names in all of racing. Is just an absolute joy, and one of them certainly here on the screen, Scott Dixon, and always great to see him. Let's see how he's looking here. A little bit of understeer as he goes through turn 12. Let's see turn 13, 14. Very easy to have understeer, and then that snap oversteer as we just saw him having there. Now turn 15, kind of a similar thing. Very easy to have that understeer, and then rear end snaps away. Graham Rahal, let's see if they've got that car figured out a bit better. We saw earlier that the rear end was just dancing all over the top of the surface. Very, very difficult for Graham to keep that thing in check. And so far from a couple of corners, it's still looking a bit nervous. Just you see how tentative he is with the steering input. Doesn't feel like he has the comfort to be able to crank that steering wheel in the middle of the corner, and that's not a nice feeling to have. That means the rotation of the car doesn't happen as quickly as you want it. It means that you can't lean on it, and therefore the car isn't getting the direction that it needs off the corners. So still a bit of work to do here for Graham Rahal.
Less than 50 minutes remaining in this session. Good news for teams and drivers. The forecast looks like it's going to cooperate tomorrow as well. Tomorrow should be another picture-perfect day for Test here.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. And obviously we hope that the same happens for the race weekend here in March.
Colton Herta, Will Power, Rosenquist, Rossi, and Santino Ferrucci, the top 5. Then Pickett, Erickson, Pagenaud, Ederson, and James Hinchcliffe, the top 10. Scott Dixon, Ryan Hunter-Reay, Sebastian Bourdais, Zach Veach, and Jack Harvey through 15th. Ed Jones, Mateus Lace, Takuma Sato, Graham Rahal, Joseph Newgarden through position 20. Then Elio Castroneves, Max Chilton, Marco Andretti, Kyle Kaiser, and Tony Kanaan. It always makes you feel good when 25 cars show up for spring.
Yeah, it's just awesome.
And I mean, lineups are set too. I mean, now they're once upon a time, you didn't know who was driving for who and when. Sometimes until January, February, and as we mentioned once upon a time not that long ago, Dale Coyne had a TBA on the entry list for St. Petersburg, and all of that is firmed up and solidified. Unfortunately, the car that we expected to see was the second car from Harding Steinbrenner Racing from Pato Award. That's not going to happen. The hope is that something will materialize with someone for him, because he does have that $1 million sponsorship money that could at least result in a partial season for Pato.
Yeah, let's hope so, and certainly deserving. And so far, Colton Herta showing great form for this team. So I know Pato's going to be especially bummed looking at that and thinking, man, I could be up there as well, fighting near the top of the charts. So hope to see him back in a car soon.
We do again, but we want to remind you that now's as good on NBC Sports Gold. The annual price of $49.99, but that's just until March 10th. So, get it for your loved one for Valentine's Day, as Andrew says he's going to do for his wife. Because after March the 10th, it goes up to $54.99. You'll get all the NBC Sports personnel that cover the IndyCar series on a regular basis. You'll get Indy Lights and IndyCar practice, qualifying. The races will be posted, within a couple of hours after they're completed. That'll be available on demand. So you can go to www.nbcsports.com, look for Gold at IndyCar, and you can sign up for that and be set for the subscription, which will run 1 year, of course.
Yes, indeed. And Brendan Goodjohn asking a question here. Why have teams built a pit wall when they've got the pit stalls? Fueling safety, too many cars running. It does puzzle me why IndyCar and NASCAR do that, and that's obviously because the tracks that we go to are so different from track to track. So not all tracks have the luxury of having these pit stalls built in to the paddock. So because of that, for consistency purposes, they build this wall, and crew therefore have specific regulations about how many crew members can be over that wall. So it's a little bit IndyCar tradition, but it's also from a logistics perspective to keep it consistent from event to event, to make sure that every single event has the same rules applied. So that is the reason for that.
Good look at the 26. Zach Veach. What a coup for that young man and his sponsorship. Gainbridge now presenting sponsor of the Indianapolis 500. He'll be flying their colors. Zach, part of that announcement a couple of weeks ago at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and it all started with a phone call saying, hey, do you happen to know anybody who might know anybody that can help me? And the next thing you know, Group 1001 comes on board, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, and boy, has he made the most of his opportunity. I mean, just so impressive in his rookie year last year, with that 4th place at Long Beach early on in the season, then a few struggles, few ups and downs, but showing the pace all the way through the season to truly be a front runner. And he's feeling bullish about his opportunities this year. So yeah, I think we're going to see a very, very strong Zach Veach in 2019.
Part of that Andretti Autosport stable, and to add Connor Daly to that mix for the month of May. I mean, Connor is obviously, with that Air Force sponsorship, over the moon happy to again be paired with his amazing race teammate, Alexander Rossi. They never thought they'd have the chance to be teammates again, but you add him to the mix, and that adds to an already stout lineup at Andretti Autosport.
Yeah, no, it does for sure. And yeah, again, it makes it that much more difficult to kind of predict winners, both for the championship and for the Indy 500, because there's really no bad combinations out there. There's no one that you know are going to be 4 or 5 seconds off the pace. You know, every single one kind of qualifying on a road course is generally going to be within that 1 second. So that's genuinely exciting, and someone again that I think can surprise a few people this year if he's given the opportunity to do multiple races is right in the picture here, Kyle Kaiser. Do you remember how strong he ran at ISM Raceway last year? I mean, he won there in Indy Lights, ran there in IndyCar, qualified well for the Indy 500 last year in 17th, I believe, and actually had a fairly strong run until some mechanical issues. But it's a driver and team combination that I think can actually surprise a lot of people.
Well, and I, a handful of times last year, he filled in for you with us in the booth from time to time, and it became readily apparent to me that not only was he watching from a driver analyst standpoint, but he was watching practice sessions, qualifying sessions, and racing sessions, and he was taking notes in his mind. I mean, he was watching what other drivers were doing and taking full advantage of having that bird's eye view of most of the race courses. Gateway, for instance, was one of those places, and yeah, I mean, he was just I think he were down on pit road tasting food or something, if I remember right, while he was up at the booth working. But it's just a likable kid, and you hope for good things for him as we continue to move forward, for sure. Speaking of young kids, Colton Herta continues P1. Will Power just behind him, Rosenquist, Simon Pagenaud, and Rossi, your top 5 as we are now under 45 minutes in our final session here of the day at Circuit of the Americas.
And just a reminder that you can log on online, IndyCar.com, to watch live timing along with seeing the live stream here. So great opportunity to see who's on track. And one question that we got is asking why Tony Kanaan has only completed 6 laps, and we do not have an answer on that as we speak, but we will certainly try to track that down.
But we, sometimes, as Kyle Kaiser talked about earlier today, they had a little mechanical gremlin that they just didn't anticipate, which limited the number of laps that they were able to turn in that session. That has since changed, and they have turned more laps, most assuredly. So you don't know in terms of what the plans are for race team. Maybe they just wanted to do some install laps and whatnot and shake their cars down today, because we haven't seen really Matthias Laced out there turning too terribly many laps, and maybe tomorrow expects to be the big day for them. Laced has turned 12 laps, and Tony Kanaan has turned just 6, so maybe tomorrow will be the more active day for both.
And don't discount the fact that with only having 8 sets of tires over the 2 days,
sure,
that they've elected, again, to your point, just choosing the overall gearbox package. Okay, we're happy with the gearing. We're happy with the overall downforce of the car. Now we're going to save all our tires for all the running tomorrow so they can truly maximize that. And it's crazy to think that you have 8 sets of tires and that would actually limit your running. But such is the peak of these tires that you only get those 2-3 magic laps in them before it starts falling off. And, yeah, huge impact.
Boy, to Kara Adams' point, if you look just to the right of the scoring pile line, you see those red shirts trimmed with black sleeves. You know who those are, folks? Those are Firestone engineers at all the pit boxes. And when those cars come in, they're right there. And again, they're especially with a new venue like this, Firestone is going to be paying particular attention to tire wear to make sure that they have that compound just right. I think they're pretty comfortable, as Kara Adams told us earlier. I think they're pretty comfortable with what they've come up with. But it is, as you know, and you've grown accustomed to, it's not like it's out of the question that they wouldn't still make some adjustments before we got back here.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I think, as we talked about earlier, I'm a big fan of big drop-off, because that means that the window of opportunity for strategy gets ever bigger. So I'm a huge fan of that, and that's certainly what we have here so far, is a tire that has a really good peak and then drops off. And then it's just a matter of what compound and construction is the Firestone red tire going to be, because typically that's the one that's even peakier in its grip and drops off even more aggressively.
A long look earlier at Felix Rosenquist. Let's talk a little bit about it. We mentioned it this morning, but for those of you that weren't able to join us, a can't-miss prospect by many, including fellow drivers. So tell us what it is, in your opinion, that makes him can't miss.
I think it's just the fact that he can literally drive anything, anywhere. I mean, he last year he basically spent the entirety of the year on an airplane, because he was flying between Asia and Europe and racing in Formula E, as well as in the Japanese Super GT Championship. And it's just the fact that he's won races in Formula E where there's a tremendous amount of power saving that you have to do. Super GT, which is obviously a big, heavy GT car. He's won Super Formula races. He's won the European Formula 3 Championship. So he's won races in Indy Lights even back in 2016. So I think it's just the fact that he's so well-rounded as the driver. So the only big question mark hanging over Felix Rosenquist is how quickly he'll adapt to ovals, because he only did 1 or 2 of those back in his Indy Lights campaign in 2016, and none of them really came with ample time to prepare or test. So I don't really think that those were a fair assessment of his true capability.
Is it in racing? So you have someone like Scott Dixon, and your Chip Ganassi and Mike Hull and Barry Wanzer and company. You're looking for somebody to put into that 10 car. Clearly, he comes with a rather impressive resume. How much, though, does who he is and what he is as a person in terms of his personality, his makeup, his approach to things, his thought process, how much is that involved? Or is it just a matter of just saying, yeah, this guy's talented. If there's any quirks, we'll deal with him. We think we'll put him in the race car. Or him being the right fit, is that a focus?
I honestly, you obviously want the fastest race car driver you could possibly find. And on the right of our screen here, we see just one of that in Dario Franchitti, who's still a trusted advisor here for Chip Ganassi Racing.
One of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, just a tremendous driver. And Felix Rosenquist certainly will be able to lean on Dario a lot during the course of this year. But for me, it sort of of 75% are you just an amazing race car driver, but then the other 25%, you have to be a good fit from a personality perspective. And I think Felix kind of brings that low drama personality to the picture. He's also managed by Stefan Johansson, who also manages Scott Dixon. So I think probably Stefan knew coming into this that, yeah, they have very similar mindsets. And then it's also a matter of having a similar driving style, because you can imagine if the two drivers have a similar driving style, then it's going to be a lot easier to develop that car in conjunction with each other. Whereas if one driver loves a car that's loose and free and flowing all over the racetrack, and the other one loves one that's bolted to the ground, then it could be a little bit more difficult. But I think that's what we've seen so far, two drivers that are very, very similar in driving style. Certainly their mental approach to everything, very, very similar as well. And I think, frankly, Chip Ganassi, that they're planning for the future. They know that Scott Dixon has, a few years left in his career, sure, but he certainly, won't have decades left in his career. So they are looking for that next superstar. And I think, frankly, that's the one surprising thing from last year, where I think they genuinely thought they'd found that in Ed Jones, and so did I. I mean, if you looked at his resume from his rookie campaign with Dale Coyne Racing, everything was there. He was third in the Indy 500, had multiple top 10s, and I think he finished near the top 10 in the championship. So he was an absolute no-brainer decision for Chip Ganassi Racing. But for whatever reason, the season last year just didn't pan out. He showed flashes of speed, but also a lot of inconsistency, and that ultimately led to this opportunity for Felix Rosenqvist. And now it's really on Felix to seize that moment and make the most of the opportunity.
Sometimes, guys, you always look for the right fit. It's nobody's fault. Not suggesting it's Ed's fault or anybody else's fault. Sometimes some guys just aren't a good fit in some places, and you see that in all forms of sports for sure. As we take a peek now at a moment for Scott Dixon, as we'll call it.
Look at that braking zone for turn one, getting into that compression, a little bit too hard on the brakes. Very, very easily done, especially when the tires start falling off near the end of a stint here. It's so easy to lock up a tire and just apply a bit too much brake pressure. And I think that's what's so cool about the brake zone for turn one here is it is anything but flat and anything but easy. And I think that's going to make for some great racing. 2000,
Scott Dixon captured the Indy Lights championship back in 2000. In 2001, he was the CART Rookie of the Year award winner. And then in 2002, he ran both CART in Pac West and Chip Ganassi Racing, and then moved on from there. And the rest, as they say, is history. But think about that. He won the Rookie of the Year award in 2001. And boy has never looked back.
No.
And now with every lap that he leads and every podium finish, he continues to rewrite the record book. And what an opportunity for Felix Rosenqvist to be able to learn from Scott Dixon.
Yeah, it is. And it's just going to be a matter of Felix not putting too much pressure on himself, because I think outright pace-wise, the two are probably going to be very, very similar. But the advantage, and a big lockup for someone up the road here ahead of Spencer Pigot. What is that coming into turn 11? Who was that? That was a ton of brake smoke down there. But no, it's going to be a matter for Felix Rosenqvist just accepting the fact that Scott has so much more experience in the races themselves than in pure execution. Scott is definitely going to have the upper hand. So it's just about being a sponge for Felix Rosenqvist and learning every single time he's in the car.
Just amazing to get a good look at that race car from the nose on back, and just the slickness of the lines and the way the car is set up. Boy, you can tell it's designed to move air over it, under it, beside it, around it, whatever the case may be.
For sure it is. And real power here in the shot coming into turn 11. Let's see what he can do. Currently second on the charts, but a full 1.4 seconds behind Colton Herta. That is quite the gap Colton Herta's been putting up there, and clearly a qualifying simulation for Colton Herta. But despite that, to be 1.4 seconds up the road of anyone else is mighty impressive.
And now we understand the benefits as the track grips up, and the benefits to that. So my question would be, as the track grips up, particularly in the corner, as you come off of the corner and you head toward a straightaway, you want to get back into the throttle. As that rubber gets laid down, do you learn throughout the course of the day that you're able to climb back into that throttle a little quicker and a little harder because of that rubber that's being laid down?
Oh, 100%. And you're just constantly, and it's not just session to session, it's every single lap you're learning something new, because the these drivers will be able to feel whether they've underdriven or overdriven any particular corner, and then they'll quickly adjust to that, with their driving and also with the requirements of the car from an engineering perspective. And the only other thing here, as the rubber goes down, is the fact that the track gets more and more line sensitive, because the rubber obviously only tends to go down in one spot. So
right.
if you
the racing groove, if you will.
Exactly. So now if you miss the apex by a half a car width, that has a much bigger penalty than it did at the beginning of the day when there was no rubber down. So now it's really, really heightening all your senses here, and you have to just be picture perfect.
So James Hinchcliffe, the mayor of Hinchtown, taking a lap around COTA. We hopped on board with him. He decides not to pit. The shadows of that massive grandstand in that area down the main straightaway. We'll climb up the hill and lay out. Let's take a lap with James Hinchcliffe. And the level of concentration that has to be maintained. I mean, 20 turns, it's a long haul around this place, and it is mentally and physically challenging.
Yeah, it is, and especially if you make a mistake in the early part of the lap, you have the better part of 2 minutes to get around to have another crack at a lap. So it makes that penalty even bigger, almost a bit like Road America, where you really need to be picture perfect, because a single mistake is going to carry that penalty for a long time. And look at Helio Castroneves, deep in thought here, probably communicating with his engineer, strategizing or debriefing rather how that long race run went for him. And certainly looks like they've made some big steps forward from this morning to this afternoon. And pay attention to this pit stand. Have a look at where his knee is. That's the selection of springs that they've been able to try out during the course of the day today. And that is a huge selection of both rear springs on the left of the screen and front springs on the right of the screen. And they've been working through those diligently.
And we mentioned obviously want you to check out the membership NBC Gold for the season to get that up close fan experience. But speaking of up close fan experience, you need to get hooked up with the good folks at IndyCar Nation. That, of course, the official fan organization for the NTT IndyCar Series. And if you want the fan experience at the racetrack, unlike any other, you need to become a member. I mean, they get you up close and personal. We see them taking Fan Nation members up into the flag stand. Last year, how many times did we bring them into the broadcast booth? We let them put the headsets on and IndyCar radio and set it on practice and qualifying sessions. You get great swag, T-shirts, hats, you name it. And I'm telling you, it's a great way to get yourself up close and personal at NTT IndyCar Series events.
And I would say it's not even from a fan perspective. It's living essentially the life of everyone that works in this sport, because you do get that level of access with IndyCar Nation. And for me, it was incredible to your point, Mark, about the amount amount of guests that we had up in the radio booth during the course of the year last year, and getting the ability to sit in, listen on the headsets, figure out what the race strategies are. I mean, just phenomenal stuff. And for me, I'm a race fan at heart, and there is nothing cooler than seeing people who maybe get to experience this for the very first time and truly get to see the behind-the-scenes stuff. So, and to be honest, it's an absolute bargain as well for anyone that wants to sign up for IndyCar Nation. It is truly a gold standard value.
IndyCarNation.com. That's where you can find out more, get yourself enrolled. You can get exclusive offers and discounts from IndyCar, exclusive offers and discounts from participating sponsors. You'll get news and alerts from IndyCar as well. So that's IndyCarNation.com. You might want to go and you might want to join today. You'll be sorry if you don't. You get the chance to meet us. I mean, what more of an incentive is there than to spend a little quality time with us at the IndyCar Radio?
Well, I was going to say, for anyone that watches this broadcast today, that means, yes, you love IndyCar racing.
Yes, I would say
and
yes.
So if you love IndyCar racing, that means you have to have an IndyCar Nation membership. The end, full stop.
Now, I can't be much help with this, but one of the questions that we did get was some recommendations in terms of restaurants.
Oh, yes.
Throughout the course of the Austin area, and I haven't gotten any real solid recommendations, anything that I'm really settled on yet. So I'm still in the market and open to suggestions.
Well, I tell you what, I've got a few, and for those Austinites that are out there, feel free to chime in on Twitter. But for me, there's a few key places. There's Franklin's Barbecue,
okay,
which is most definitely the best barbecue I've ever had in my life.
All right.
There is Uchiko, which is a sushi place, a Japanese place that is just magnificent.
Yeah, get back to barbecue.
And trust me, you would love that steak on the hot rock that you get. And
steak on the hot rock.
Oh yeah,
now that I might do.
Yeah,
I might do.
It is tender as all get out of town. And then the third one, last night I went to a place called Javi's Mexican place right across from our hotel, and it was absolutely tremendous. So, a lot of good food scenes here. Obviously, anything downtown is going to be fantastic. But those three.
Now, see, I don't remember much about the city. The last time I was in Austin, Texas, was in 1987.
Oh, wow.
I was doing Indiana State University baseball, and they made the NCAA regional. They played at Dish Falk Field at the University of Texas. And I remember they played the second game. Texas was playing the first game, and I walked in and saw 13,000 people up singing, the Texas fight song of the hook and horns and everything. And to show you how well taken care of we were, 7 of us drove in a 12-passenger van 19 hours straight through from Terre Haute to Austin in a van with AM radio and no air conditioning. But after Indiana State was eliminated, we drove back and we listened to the 1987 Indianapolis 500 in the improbable 4th win by Al Sr. And I had taken him in the pool, and I think I won $25 that day. That's what I remember.
That's a pretty good day.
Yeah, it was.
Pretty good.
Yeah, if you're going to drive 19 hours in a van with an AM radio, no air conditioning, you should probably do it on the day of the Indianapolis 500. And that was it. That gave me an idea of just the expansiveness of the network, Anders, because when a station, we would lose the signal, we just turn it a few dots, and boom, it'd pop right back up. And that was from Texas all the way back to Indiana. Just incredible. I remember Town Lake in Austin, and that was about it. That's all I remember.
And that's obviously the privilege we have now with satellite radio, is the fact that and anyone anywhere in the country can watch the.
What is it, 209 and 214? I think you can get us on Sirius and XM this year. So.
But watching this run here of Felix Rosenqvist, and I'm pretty excited, and it's a bit of a flick there of the wheel going through turn 8. I was just going to commend him for his consistency with input and not putting a foot wrong, and then he just had that bit of a moment there. But so far, a fairly nice run here, and this looks to be a bit of a long run here for Felix Rosenqvist. So wouldn't be surprised here to see over the course of the next 10-15 minutes people doing slightly longer runs, and then in the last 15 minutes of the session, that's when everyone bolts on that final set of new tires to go for that big all shiny lap time to try and take Colton Herta off his pedestal.
Too early in this process, being a new racetrack, to consider anything like a qualifying sim, or do you think you might see that over that last 15 minutes, or maybe if at all tomorrow?
Yeah, I think everyone's still kind of playing the tire game at this point in time, and but I mean, you always want to show off your speed to some extent. So I think now towards the end of the session, everyone's going to be bolting on some newer tires and really just trying to get that lap time in there, slightly lower fuel load, pump a bit of fuel out, and really go for that aggressive setup. So Felix Rosenqvist concluding his run here, coming to pit lane. Be interesting to see if he actually comes in and puts a new set of tires on, or if he calls it a day.
Last year's car with the aero changes, how much more difficult it was to drive. It was funny in years prior to that, since we went to the DW12 chassis, even at a Toronto or a Long Beach, when guys didn't qualify very well, they still had some optimism if they made, the round of 12. We didn't see that last year. If you didn't make the Fast Six, you felt like that you were perhaps in for a very, very, very long day. The importance of track position last year, we heard the phrase track position uttered more last year than I think we had in the previous 5 years combined.
Yeah, no, and it was also very, very track dependent, because there were certain tracks where you could race your way through. The street courses and road courses obviously raced very, very well, but the ovals was a bit more of a struggle, and in particular the Indianapolis 500, where track position was everything. If you were out in front in clean air, it was going to be super difficult for anyone to do anything with you. So, and I think to some extent Firestone and IndyCar have done some steps to help identify kind of the overtaking issues there were on the ovals last year. Part of that is in a little bit less of a load-sensitive tire from Firestone. It's also with a few more adjustable options on the aero side of things.
Well, they've added horsepower too at some of the ovals. So what's the advantage of that?
Well, I think horsepower is just magnificent, because it means a bigger change of speed from the straightaways to the corners, which basically means more modulation and more opportunity for overtaking. So I think that's always going to be a positive thing. But from an aero perspective and from a tire perspective, I think they've made a really good step forward for the ovals. And for me, the road and street courses last year were just amazing. Every single one of them raced just perfectly, and I'm so excited to see that again this year.
Jack Harvey in the 60 back out onto the track. Good to see those guys stepping up their efforts this year. We're going to see Jack Harvey on track for 10 races this season.
Yeah, and that's just great news for him. And again, with Michael Shank at the helm of that team, decided instead of running a full season with less resource than we could, or less than ideal resource, should I say, we're going to do 10 races, but we're going to put full focus into those races. And I think it's the exact right mindset for where they're at, and also for where Jack Harvey's at in his career.
Well, and Jack said it wasn't necessarily that he changed his workout routine and his workout regimen. He made some adjustments in terms of his diet and his food intake, and that resulted in a noticeable weight loss for Jack Harvey, who is not a big guy to begin with.
Yeah, no. And you can see it. You can see it in him. Even I did a charity karting event with him a couple of weeks ago, and you could just see he's really trimmed up. So he's lean and mean and ready to take on the challenge.
Did he win?
What's that?
That karting event?
Did I win?
Yeah.
Oh, God, no. I was involved in a number of on-track incidents.
Did you cause them?
Most of them, yes. Okay. Not all of them.
All right, so nothing's changed then from what I remember.
None at all. Nope. Getting a question here from Patrick Revenge Apex, asking, is RC Enerson confirmed for any races? Also, do you know anything about his sponsor? I do not know if he's confirmed for any races, nor do I know anything about his sponsor, though I was going to look that up because it's a pretty interesting tagline underneath that. What is it? Craft 1961. So I actually need to look that up here. So anyone that can provide any more info on that, or the status of his race deal, would be great, because it's been fairly quiet. We just saw him testing at Laguna Seca, and now again for these 2 days. So let's see. But it'd be great to see him on track.
I mean, be it Pat Caporelli with IndyCar, or Steve Whitaker, Patrick Stiffen, we've gotten pretty good response whenever we've tossed something out there. Not only from people that are listening across the country and around the world, but people that are right across the hallway in the media center, like the ones we mentioned with Steve and Patrick. And by the way, check out those folks at Trackside Online. if you want news and information throughout the course of the weekend, they're a good source as well, and they follow, whether there's TSO Ladder that follows the road to Indy, and of course also the NTT IndyCar series, and Patrick and Steve and their crew do a great job throughout the course of the season for sure. They're good friends.
So then Jack Harvey out for the last few laps here with 19 minutes remaining in this session. Can anyone do anything with Colton Herta, who's still got that 1.4 second cushion back to Will Power, and again must have been under new tire circumstances, but still to take a 1.4 second gap out of the field is pretty impressive, considering he's got one IndyCar race under his belt, and this is his first time here at COTA.
Watching Jack Harvey, SiriusXM sponsorship, AutoNation also on board with that car. That's a great partnership for Jack Harvey and that race team, and as we mentioned, an expanded effort this year with 10 races all told. For Jack Harvey, a likable guy, a fan-friendly for sure. Jack is very active on social media. You see him a lot of, as you mentioned, a lot of charity events. Anytime there's a group of IndyCar fans gathered, you usually find Jack Harvey right there in the middle of them. A likable guy for sure. And
of course, other than the fact that pink is just an awesome color, the reason why he's driving in a pink car is because of AutoNation's Drive Pink campaign, which is raising awareness for breast cancer. So tremendous cause that they're driving and creating awareness for, and great to see AutoNation and SiriusXM stick with Jack Harvey for another season, and another round of huge opportunities this year.
So again, the clock continues to wind down on this session. Want to thank Jake Query for the great stuff that he has provided from pit road over the course of the weekend. And Andrews, I tell you, I've really enjoyed throughout the course of this day of coverage the interaction that we've had with fans. It's just been amazing, and the comments on what we provided here has been overwhelmingly positive as we take a look at some brake smoke there, a little deep into the corner.
RC Anderson just a little optimistic into turn 11, but no, to your point, it's been amazing seeing all the activity and all the questions on Twitter, and tell you these are some of the most exciting days or most fun days that we get to do, and we get to interact with everyone watching at home, and to see people from Sweden, Italy, Germany, UK, US obviously goes without saying, but all tweeting and wanting to be a part of this is awesome. So certainly for those of you that haven't been to an IndyCar race yet, this certainly wouldn't be the worst place to do it here at COTA on March 24th.
Yeah, Circuit of the Americas. You can go to their website and you can get ticket information about the fan experience for the race coming up. And I would say get on it pretty quick. There are a variety, as you talked about, sight lines. There are so many great places from which you can view this race and see not only a fair amount of racing, but you can see from one location different types of racing. In fact, you can see an area where there's a long straightaway, but you can also see that lead to a very technical portion of the race track. So there's a little something for everybody in terms of what style of racing that you enjoy.
Yeah, for sure there is, and I just love these hard braking zones here, which just provide such great overtaking opportunity. And then you have the tight confines of the infield, so that the crowd can see the cars throughout. And Joseph Newgarden here coming up to one of those brake zones right now, turn 12. Hard on the binders, 6th gear all the way down to first, and it's downhill, so it's a very, very tricky corner to put together. And now through this very technical section here again, turn 13, turn 14, very easy to lose the rear end here, and then you got to quickly get it set up for that turn 15, which just tightens up. And you can see here, Joseph just backing off a little bit, wanting a clean run here, so he's undoubtedly going to go for a bit of a qualifying simulation here to end the session. So as he comes through turn 16, 17, 18, there we have Colton Herta fly by, and now Joseph Newgarden on a flyer through the timing line. Turn 19, quick jab of the brake, 1 gear down, and now into turn 20, and then he'll unleash the power onto the front straightaway. What a track.
Look at that view. Look at that view. That is incredible.
Just brilliant.
133 feet uphill, and as you said, from coming off of turn number 20, it looks like we're going to drive right into it. It looks like it goes almost straight up.
It really does. And I had the opportunity to drive a rental car around here a couple of years ago, and the car started downshifting when I got to that hill to maintain momentum going up the hill. But boy, look at Joseph Newgarden. Look at the momentum he's carrying through the S's here. And now 6, got to bring it quickly back to set up for turn 7 and then for turn 8 and then up to that really tricky spot we've seen all throughout the course of the day. Very easy to drop a wheel here. Is he going to keep it clean? Yep, no problem there. And he's got clean air in front of him as well. So this could be a very, very good lap here for Joseph Newgarden, who currently sits 11th on the charts, 1.7 seconds outside of the lead.
Best driver right now in the IndyCar Series to not have won a 500.
Yeah, I suppose Joseph is right up there, isn't he?
It's not an easy question, is it? I mean, that is a debate that is ongoing in terms of, the past at the 500. You hear names like Lloyd Ruby and Gary Bettenhausen and names like that in terms of guys that, we're so very, very good there, but for whatever the reason, never got to victory lane. But before long, I think that conversation will probably start to pick up a little bit of steam.
Yeah, no, I would fully agree with you on that, and don't take away from the fact the other two other drivers that have been so strong at the Indy 500, Marco Andretti and Simon Pagenaud, long overdue for both of them. So Joseph Newgarden concludes the lap, does not go quicker. Let's see here. Nope, Joseph Newgarden does not improve upon his time. That's actually quite surprising here, and carries on. So maybe they are just focused on the longer runs here, not too worried about the overall lap time at this point.
We're approaching just about 12 minutes remaining in this session, and gotta say, racing fans in Texas, well done. I mean, everybody talking about the turnout here today and how crowded pit road was, and all of the fans that we saw making their way in and around this facility. There was a buzz here for a test session, and it can't often say that about test sessions, especially this form of racing or any other for that matter. But clearly, people in the state of Texas love all forms of racing and love coming to this facility, and I think this bodes well for the turnout that we should see when we come back here in late March.
Yeah, one driver that wants a bit of racing right now is Colton Herta. He's trying to suck up on that rear end of Sebastian Bourdais. Let's see if he can do anything here before the breaks into turn 12. Don't think he's close enough. Not quite this time. He caught up so quickly through the S's, and now just slowing right down again to potentially go for another flyer here is Colton Herta, letting Sebastian Bourdais run away from him.
I thought maybe for a minute he might just be trying to stay in that line and see what Sebastian's doing around the racetrack, see if he can pick up anything.
Well, I was also thinking it could be a good opportunity to learn what the car handles like in dirty air as well, because you don't get that chance in practice very often. So I would actually relish that opportunity and really try to stay with Sebastian Bourdais. And you have to assume the tires are at the end of their life anyway, so you might as well just run them to the very ragged edge and at least learn something. Okay, how badly is my car affected in that dirty air from the turbulence?
So that 130 plus foot hill at the end of the straightaway, because that hill exists, as we take a look at it now, does that eliminate the opportunity, for lack of a better term, a slingshot move down that straightaway? Or is the kind of on the back of the course, that really long straightaway is the one place that you're going to be able to do that?
No, you absolutely can do something, and especially as the tire life gets worse and worse, you can imagine trying to get the run off that final corner with a bunch of wheel spin is going to be very difficult to get the power down. And flying through the S's here. That is great sight to see, but no, and it's also partially because of that uphill there that makes the brake zone very, very short, so it makes it a bit more difficult to execute a pass, whereas the brake zone in turn 12 is downhill, so the brake zone is longer, and therefore it's a bit easier to make a move on someone. But certainly at the beginning of races and restarts, let's not forget about restarts here in the IndyCar series. I think we're going to see some very late moves into turn 1.
Just about to the 10-minute mark now, and a handful of teams have taken full advantage of the track time that's being offered to them, and I don't think anybody has learned more perhaps than Colton Herta has learned today.
He's done some serious miles today, that's for sure. So the only question is how many sets of tires does he have remaining for tomorrow's test, because he's been out there an absolute ton.
Yeah, we're seeing Takuma Sato turn laps, and I think he, along with Graham Rahal, is looking for a solid 2019 campaign. I mean, those two have been together now for an entire season and an entire off season, and both are looking. I think the word, obviously, if you win races, Andrews, the old adage is, if you win, nobody's found a way to beat that. It's just like when you're coaching the traditional stick and ball sport. Keep it simple. All you got to do is outscore. No matter what you run, what you do. And so if you win races, championship's going to take care of itself for sure. But I think by design and the competitiveness of this field, it's not realistic to think you can expect to win every race, but realistically you're not going to. So consistency, I think, is the biggest challenge to winning a championship in the IndyCar series.
Oh, and I think that's why Scott Dixon's won so many of them, is just because he doesn't make mistakes, and even when he doesn't have a pick seat, he just kind of keeps in it. And one driver that's been seeking a championship for a long time now is the guy in the shot, Graham Rahal, who just went green in the first sector. Let's see what he can do in the second sector. So he's actually on to a pretty handy little lap here, I think, Graham Rahal is. Let's see what he can do here as he comes into this tricky infield section of the track here, 13, 14, and now into turn 15. This could be a really good lap, and it also looks like they've got a bit better of a handle on the car here for Graham Rahal, as he had a bit too much understeer there coming off that turn 15. But let's see what this lap ends up being for him. He's moved up to 7th, and let's see what he can do across the line. So Graham Rahal comes into the pits.
Did we see much movement in the 15 car?
Let's see here.
They've worked on it most of the day, for sure.
So Graham stays.
They've been massaging it.
So it's actually kind of crazy, the fact that they're pushing quite hard now, but struggling to improve those lap times. So not sure if the track's gone away from them or if they're doing something else. And look at this wholesale change on the back of Colton Herta's car. You can see the rear shocks on the top of that rear wing there. So they're probably making a fairly significant change to the back of that car. So that means keeping the same springs on the rear, but changing out the shock package, which with 7 minutes to go in this session is a little bit tight, but they're trying to maximize. Hello, Colton.
Little piece in a way.
Yeah,
thanks,
just trying to maximize this test time as much as they possibly can.
Well, it's for sure racing season. I mean, it all starts with the roar, and then of course the Rolex 24 hours. And of course, he was a part of that. He's sporting that Rolex back in the media center, I guess, for media day on Monday.
And how about that, making your debut in the Rolex 24 and winning it, and not just in any category, winning it in the GTLM, the factory GT category with BMW. I mean, what a tremendous achievement for him in his very first Rolex 24.
And then once the dust settles on the Rolex 24, Speed Week starts at Daytona. You had the Clash on Sunday, literally.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. Exactly.
The way that ended for Jimmy Johnson getting the win, and then of course the Truck Series and all the other support races, and then of course the Daytona 500, and then of course we'll get our season underway at St. Petersburg just a couple of weeks after that. So racing season and all is truly right with the world. And as we discussed it earlier, when it was suggested that the conversation comparing the lap times between Formula One and IndyCar, each racing season always begins a debate as which series is on the upswing, which one has the better racing. And I'm just a race fan. I watch a little bit of everything, and I enjoy the variety of it for sure. Much like, as we said, if you're a fan of football, you also watch baseball, you also watch soccer, or whatever the case may be, and that's the way I choose to enjoy motorsports for sure.
Yeah, no, agree with that sentiment, and I won't say that IndyCar is better than any other sport, but I watch a little bit of other forms of racing and a lot of IndyCar racing.
Well, we know which one our favorite is, and I think it's okay to have a favorite and still be supporters of other series, but I maintain that especially over the course of a race weekend, there are some race weekends when you see no fewer than 5, 6, maybe 7 classes of cars over the course of a race weekend in conjunction with an NTT IndyCar Series event, and that is a rarity friend. There's almost no other series in the world that can claim that kind of support in a race weekend. And that's one of the reasons why, street and road course racing has become so very, very popular, is because there's always a car on the racetrack and there's always something wrong.
Yeah, there most certainly is. From IndyCar to World Challenge to Stadium Super Trucks, for all crammed into one weekend.
We're rolling trucks and jumping them and everything else.
So Colton Herta here going out for his final run of the day here, being released from his pit box. Same tires, but a fairly significant change to what looks to be the rear dampers. So be interesting to see if he can do anything. We doubt he's going to do anything to topple his fastest lap, but it could be something that they find just for overall compliance of the car that'll help benefit him tomorrow. So every last little minute you get here on track is absolutely crucial, and with 4 minutes to go, he's going to go out and get at least 2-3 laps.
Okay, so Joe B asked the question, and it is just this simplistic. Can you speculate? How is it that Colton Herta right now has the fastest time with all of these veterans?
Well, it's a great question, and the only thing I can assume, again, not having visibility into what the teams are doing, is the fact that he would have been on a very low fuel run and a new set of tires, that other teams wouldn't have gone that aggressive on their new tire runs, and maybe hadn't gone that low on fuel. So I think that's, and plus he's probably done a great job of executing it. Let's not take anything away from that, but certainly coming into the season, you won't see a gap that big. And speaking of gap that big, Will Power has had something to say for that. He just went purple or green in all his sectors and has gone within 5/10 here of Colton Herta. So we are going to see some fast laps to end the session.
Maybe Colton Herta is already, and those folks at Harding Steinberg are already benefiting from their technical partnership with Andretti Autosport. Maybe it's paid off that quickly.
Oh, no, I would absolutely say so. And just to be able to take advantage of that shock programming, I mean, it is one of the last bits and pieces of the IndyCar series where you can actually develop a technology by yourself. And so shocks, therefore, come at a huge premium. And so the ability to tap into that is going to be absolutely massive for them. And Colton Herta here prepping for another flying lap. Again, he's going to come around here, turn 16, 17, 18. That'll take you up to the timing line where every practice session and qualifying session will be started right there. And he's off on a flyer. Let's see what he can do here. And
he did look a little quicker when he came.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, most certainly. So probably 2 more laps here for Colton Herta as he just kind of flirts with those sleeping policemen, exited the final corner and up towards the brake zone in turn 1. It's just incredible. Look, they're doing 160, 165 miles an hour. Boom, slam on the brake. Down in the first gear. That is how you do it. Nicely done.
I'll let you call this. Stay with him.
This is just then. This is where my favorite part of watching an IndyCar series car around here. Look at how. Will Power. Spinner. Spun it off the track. And what part of the track is that? Oh, that's the trouble spot. That's no, it's not. That's coming out of turn 19. So that could potentially bring out the checkered flag to this session, because no one's going to be able to go quicker in that final sector with a yellow flag, and it looks like he stalled the engine. So that will be a slightly early end to the session here for Will Power, who is probably pushing fairly hard to try and better that time of Colton Herta.
A little bit of frustration for Colton Herta as we see the red flag come out. We expect that to be followed perhaps by a checkered, especially considering we've got a couple of sessions on tap for tomorrow here at the Circuit of the Americas, and the clock continues to wind down. So what have you taken away from this session, what we've watched in these two test sessions today?
Well, really just how big of a struggle it's been to get the compliance from the cars. We've seen cars sliding all over the place. We've had a couple of spinners. We've had people go way off track, and so it's kind of back to what we saw in the preseason and pre-event testing at a lot of the events last year, where it's just struggling to get that compliance from the car until that Firestone rubber truly builds in. So I think tomorrow is going to bring a whole new set of kind of complexity to it, with everyone knowing the track a bit better, the engineers a chance to go back and look at all the data from the day to come up with the best information possible for some better setups tomorrow.
Hey, we want to thank Ben Hanley. He joined us today. Of course, 5-car deal set up for him this season. Always enjoyed visiting with him, get his thoughts and impressions. And also want to thank Ryan Norman from Indy Lights and Andretti Autosport for joining us in the booth here today. Jake Query with all kinds of good stuff on pit road for us today. It's been fun.
It's been a lot of fun, and just getting to see them all in action as a racing fan, this is what we live for. So to see them on track like this in an official manner a month before the start of the season, I will take it.
Yeah, looks like the steering wheel is popped off. And the fastest driver of the day, how about it, young Colton Herta?
I don't think coming into this day he would have expected that, but yeah, you'll take it, and that's a great job from him. And obviously, no one is necessarily going for outright lap time this early in the going, but still, that's got to leave you with a good taste.
Hey, folks, we want to thank you for all the interaction today and all the questions. We certainly appreciate the thoughtful comments that you made, the positive feedback that we received, and most of all, Anders, we received a hearty welcome back from a lot of people today, and that always makes you feel good.
Yes, we did. It's been an absolute blast, and cannot wait now for one more day of testing tomorrow and then roll into St. Pete in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it'll be here before you know it, and as you said, we can't wait. That's a look at Colton Herta. He was quick today. Will Power was second quick. Then Elio Castroneves jumped up to P3 toward the end of the session. Felix Rosenquist, Scott Dixon, Simon Pagino, Alexander Rossi, Graham Rahal, Santino Ferrucci, and Spencer Piggott complete the top 10. Marcus Ericsson, James Hinchcliffe, Joseph Newgarden, Zach Veach, and Ryan Hunter-Reay through position 15. 16th quick was Marco, 17th Jack Harvey, 18th R.C. Enerson, Ed Jones, 19th quick, then Sebastian Bourdais, Max Chilton, Mateus Lace, Takuma Sato, Kyle Kaiser, and Tony Kanaan. 25 cars that tested. For Anders Krohn and Jake Query, Mark Jane saying so long for now from the Circuit of the Americas.